Yes, I'm Batman.
I'm Batman. I'm Batman, Alfred.
I'm Batman.
I am Batman.
I'm Batman. I'm Batman. I'm vengeance.
Greetings, Bat Family! Welcome back to Holy BatCast, brought to you by Real Fans for Real Movies. Make sure you visit holybatcast.com or find us all over social media on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Just search for Holy BatCast, you will find us. And if you love the show, you want to help support us, you can do that on Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/holybatcast. As always, huge thank you to those of you who've done it. We really do appreciate it. It means a lot to us. So, as always, Happy New Year to our patrons and everyone else as well, but especially our patrons. We're part of the Real Fans Podcast Network, so if you're looking for other shows to check out, you can check those out at rf4rm.com. And as always, I'm Andy DiGenova. You can follow me on Twitter or on Instagram. It's just my name, Andy DiGenova. This episode, we're finally going to do our spoiler-filled review of Wonder Woman 1984. But don't worry, we will give you a spoiler warning before we jump into those details. And joining me to talk about Wonder Woman 1984 is someone you hear from a lot these days. He's become invaluable to the show down there in Brisbane, Australia, sweating for the holidays. It's Brendan Lowe. Hey, Brendan. Good day.
G'day. I wasn't expecting that.
Good evening.
To be honest, not sweating as much as I was the last time we spoke. The temperature's been kind of mild for summer here this week. It's interesting. It's normally really hot leading up to Christmas, and Christmas, thankfully, it gets a little bit more comfortable, and then it usually gets hot as shit for New Year. But this year, New Year was quite pleasant as well. So I mean, I am in the office with the aircon on, but not blasting, and it's not super cold. So
okay,
just
well, that's
nice
good.
And comfortable
that's
for
great.
our conversation. Perfect way to spend the first evening of 2021.
That's true. It's the first day of the new year, so Happy New Year, Brendan. And I bring a little gift for New Year's on this episode because guess who's back? Back again. Jamie's back. Tell a friend, look who's back, look who's back, look who's back. It's Jamie Drewley. Oh my God, Jamie, welcome back.
Reports of my demise have been mildly exaggerated.
Just mildly. It's pretty touch and go.
Little, yeah. Somebody got the defib paddles out. That's why I'm here.
Glad to have you back. Welcome back. We missed you. The listeners missed you as well. So thanks for taking some time and joining us, at least to talk a little bit of Wonder Woman.
You can't see, but I'm hugging my microphone right now. I missed you guys.
Oh, good. Well,
except Brendan. He can F off because he's talking about how he's got the air conditioning on while I'm sitting here wearing sweatpants and thermal underwear. So, yeah, bite it.
Yeah, we've had this discussion before. I would love to be in that kind of weather.
Say that.
I've been born in the wrong country.
I find
love
that everybody who says that doesn't have to live in it for 5 months out of the year.
Yeah.
I know, but I'd love it.
The ice is whiter on the other side.
Speaking of which, we're about to have an ice storm within the hour.
Yeah. Well,
I'd love to see Oz driving in an ice storm. That would be viral video in the making right there.
Well, same here in Beijing. Cold as hell. I'm not liking it, but you know what? Won't last forever. Dealing it with it as I can. But yeah, great to have you back, Jamie. Brendan, good to have you back as well. It's good to have the core three of us for the next big DC Films release. It's been a long time since we had one of these. And so, yeah, we've seen the movie maybe more than once because of how it's been released. And so it is finally time for us to do our official review. So without further ado, let's take a look at Wonder Woman 1984. And we will start spoiler-free, even though, I gave my spoiler-free reactions 2 episodes ago, but I want to hear your guys' spoiler-free reactions too, and then we will give a spoiler warning to anybody who's listening, who doesn't want to get spoiled, but again, because of how the movie was released, I'm pretty sure everybody has seen it. You know, if you did not go to the theater, I'm sure you watched it at home on HBO Max or some, I think it's only HBO Max. So yeah, on HBO Max, that's the only way you can see it at home or whatever. I feel like in UK they released it.
No, well, it hasn't even been released in the UK yet.
Oh, well, so to our
It's
UK
VOD,
listeners.
but I think it's like later this month.
Oh, okay.
Which
Yeah, they were doing like
sucks.
premium VOD.
Yeah, I don't know why they didn't drop it on VOD on Christmas Day. That seems very strange to me, but anyway.
Yeah. But we're talking about Wonder Woman 1984, as you know. So, yeah, Gal Gadot is back as Diana Prince Wonder Woman, directed, of course, by Patty Jenkins, who also returns. Chris Pine is back as Steve Trevor. Kristen Wiig as Barbara Minerva the Cheetah. Pedro Pascal as Maxwell Lord. Robin Wright and Connie Nielsen are back as Antiope and Hippolyta. So, excellent cast as well. Hans Zimmer doing the score. And however, sorry.
I was going to say, little Lily is back as young Diana.
That's true. That's true. And despite how you feel about the movie, it has been very successful for Warner Brothers because there was news that came out just, I think, yesterday that it's been like the most watched premium video on demand title yet. So it was more than Hamilton, more than Soul, more than anything. So people are watching it. Whether or not people are liking it is another question. But people are watching it, and then it also had the biggest opening weekend for any movie since the COVID situation has begun. So even though it's available at home, still as many people as could still went to the theater to see it. So it opened with 16.7 million over the Christmas weekend, which is not a lot in the, in the non-COVID world, but in the COVID world, that's a lot. It did very well. So it's a big hit. I'm using the air quotes because hit, the definition of that is different these days just because of the circumstances. But the point is that people are watching it one way or the other, and they all got some opinions. People got some opinions. So I want to hear your guys' opinions. Spoiler-free. Jamie, because you've been gone for so long, I want to hear from you first. So shake off the cobwebs and tell us your spoiler-free thoughts on Wonder Woman 1984.
I just talk into this silver thing, right? That's
Yeah,
how I do this?
yep,
I'm sorry.
that's
Wait a
right.
minute.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'll just get it out of the way. I really like this movie. I didn't quite love it. I think it's a little bit of a mixed bag for me. These are all my opinions. I'm not going to state it as fact, as so many people seem to be popularly doing right now. For me, there are a couple of choices that I kind of scratched my head at and probably would have tried something a little bit different. But, I ain't Patty Jenkins. They didn't pay me millions of dollars to make this movie. So that's all I can offer as an opinion. I think it's loaded with heart. I think for all the critiques levied against it, I think that's the one thing that everybody wants to leave out is I think there's as much or more heart in this movie as there was in the first one. And I think that was one of the great strengths of the first one, and I think it's one of the great strengths of this one. The new character introductions, particularly Max Lord and Barbara Minerva, I think were both really good. Max is probably a little bit more of a mixed bag than Barbara for me. I think Barbara was fantastic. I loved Kristen Wiig's performance in this part. I think she really brought a level to that character that I didn't know if I would like the character this much, but I mean, I think she's great. I really think she's the highlight of the film, in my opinion. I know there's certainly varied opinions on that. I loved seeing young Diana back. I think a lot of the visual aesthetic was really good, although there was one thing in particular that we'll get when we get over the spoiler wall that I'm not sure I would have made that choice either, but, again, I ain't the filmmaker. I wish there was more positivity surrounding this movie, but all in all, I think that there's a really good film here. I just think there was probably a better film that could have been brought out with the material that was given.
Okay. Fair enough.
It's tough to really get into it without being across the wall. So
Sure.
That's as much as I can say here.
Yeah. Brendan, what about you?
copy and paste a lot of what Jamie said. I've seen it twice now, and I genuinely like it. I have a really good time. I've had a really good time both times watching it. I was thinking about this last night after I watched it the second time, and this is kind of the analogy that I thought of. It's not a perfect analogy, but it's the best I can think of. Is this, to me, reminds me of my personal opinions when I first saw Dark Knight Rises. The movie that preceded it was so damn good that they, instead of trying to copy what they'd done in sort of a way to try and better it, they went in a completely different direction. Some of the choices made are questionable, in my opinion, but it's still a good movie. And to me, I think some of the criticism being thrown at the movie is fair. A lot of the hyperbole being thrown at it is utterly ridiculous. The only real crime I think the movie is guilty of is it's not as good as the first one. But the first one was one of those lightning in a bottle movies, and to try and copy that just doesn't. Yeah, it's lightning in a bottle for a reason. But I really have a good time watching it. I think Gal is amazing in it. I think her acting is fantastic. I think she looks amazing, obviously. Kristen Wiig's Cheetah was... I mean, I think I said in a tweet the other day, that's a role that... I mean, I never would have had her on any sort of list, to play Cheetah, let alone actually get the role. And she was really good. That's a side of Kristen Wiig that I've certainly never seen before in movies. So that was great. Pedro Pascal is really entertaining in his performance. I don't know a hell of a lot about the Max Lord character, but I know enough to know that they sort of did their own thing with the character. And for the story they're telling, I went along with it. Little Diana, seeing her back was amazing. Lily, she's really, she's a sweetheart. And a pretty decent follow on Twitter, actually. She posts some charming stuff with her and a little sister and everything. But yeah, it was a good time for me at the cinema. And it's one that I'm sure I'll see at least once or twice more before it finishes its theatrical run. And then I look forward to bringing it home eventually and putting it on my shelf with all my other DC movies and, owning them forever.
All right. I mean, and I do feel like we're all pretty close on this one, which is good, because I really, really, really liked it. I feel like I'm on the verge of love. I'm not quite there, but I really, really liked it. I think that I liked it even more the second time. So if you listen to my initial spoiler-free thoughts, is that there was a lot to like about it. I had a couple nitpicks that I didn't go into detail, obviously because of spoilers, and I still won't yet, about certain plot points and things that happen along the way. A few of those worked better for me the second time, and a few of them I'm still like, and we'll talk about it. So I do think that there are some moments and some devices they use to move the story along that I think are a little clunky, that could have probably been done a little bit better. But I still was really entertained, and I still had a really great time with it. Like, I love that it's an unabashed superhero movie. It is truly a Wonder Woman movie, set in the 80s. I think Gal Gadot continues to be fantastic. Her and Chris Pine together, they're amazing. I agree with what both of you said about Kristen Wiig as the Cheetah. I think we all, when she was cast, we all went, oh, wow, didn't see that coming. But I think she's great in the movie. Like, she does such a great job really transforming throughout the movie until we really get the darker side of Kristen Wiig, and she's really good in it. I think Pedro Pascal is great. I mean, I think he's great in everything that he does, and I think he's great as Maxwell Lord. Especially from a performance standpoint. I feel like maybe people are a little mixed on the character, but I think that his performance is great. It's up there. I like the connections it makes to the first film while still very much standing on its own. And I think now that we've seen the movie, remember moving into it during the press, during the interviews and everything, Patty Jenkins kept saying, it's not a sequel. And we were all like, dude, yes, it's a sequel. Of course it's a sequel. Steve Trevor's back. Like, the Mascara's back. Of course it's a sequel. And now that I've seen the movie, I kind of understand what she was getting at. It was like she was trying to manage expectations of saying, this is not the first movie. This is not going to feel like the first movie. If you're coming into this going, I want more of the first movie, you might be disappointed. So I feel like that was almost her way of saying that, of like, yeah, of course it continues the story from the first one, but it's its own thing. It stands on its own. And so, she could say, quote unquote, it's not a sequel. That's not accurate. But I think the intent behind those comments, because it feels so different from the first film. And for me, I like that about it. I like that it's its own thing, It's checking in on this character at a different time, at a different place, and a different journey, and all that I'm into. I dig it. I liked the super bright colors. Like, I loved how Wonder Woman looked in this film, the way her costume popped. Like, I think she looked amazing. I don't think she's ever looked better. I think the action was great. So of the criticisms I'm seeing, I've seen some criticize the action, and that's one of the criticisms that I was like, wait, what? I thought the action was awesome, all of it. So that was a very surprising reaction. Again, like you said, Brendan, I think some of the criticisms are fair, and I get some of them. I agree with some of them. But what's funny is that my criticisms, which we will get to, are not the ones I have seen anyone else raise.
That doesn't surprise me, because some of the stuff I've seen raised is, forgive me, but absolute bullshit.
Yeah,
really.
Yeah. Listen, I've seen so much criticism thrown at this movie in the course of the last six and a half days, whatever it's been since it all really started flowing. And what absolutely baffles me above all else is the level of hardcore criticism that it's taking from polar opposite ends. Mm-hmm. It's too 80s. It's not 80s enough. It's too dark. It's too bright. There literally are polar opposite opinions being thrown at this thing like absolute concrete fact. And it's just making me sit over here and scratch my head. And I don't get what movie a lot of these people watch. I really don't. I don't know what the expectations were. I don't know what I mean, when you see a movie that has constant criticisms about problems that it has piled on from one side, you can kind of make sense of it. But I haven't seen a tremendous amount of consistency on what people are piling up on this movie about. Mm-hmm. So I kind of see where you're coming from there. It was like, I don't know that my problems are anybody else's problems, or that, I share the critical opinions that other people do with this. But that's the part that's baffled me the most, is I'm not seeing a lot of consistency in what people are dogpiling on this movie about.
Yeah.
Dude, someone tweeted me and said the movie's racist. And
what?
Huh?
Yep. Because of what they show of Maxwell Lord's past in the finale.
Oh,
apparently
my God.
That's racist.
Oh my God.
That's what I mean. The hyperbole is absolutely insane.
Wow. So, kind of going back to I think the different tone of this film than the first film. Personally, I liked it. Again, I liked the tone of this film, and when I was watching it, something that actually crossed my mind is I was like, do you know what this reminds me of? And I mean this as a compliment. I mean this in a very good way. To me, tonally, it feels like a Raimi Spider-Man movie. And
I can see that. Do you know what it made me think of straight away?
What?
Shazam.
Okay, yeah.
To me, tonally, it felt very much in line with Shazam.
Mm-hmm.
From the opening
You know what it
scene.
felt like to me? I mean, since we're throwing this out, you know what it felt like to me? Superman the movie.
Yeah. Or Superman 2, a little bit of Superman 2 in here, too.
Well, you get what I'm saying. I mean, there's three of us. We got three kind of different opinions about that.
But I think all of those tones are consistent.
Mm-hmm.
Because the Raimi Spider-Man films are very much Donner Superman films, and then Shazam, I think, fits well into that little wheelhouse as well, and I think so does this movie. But I like that tone. I like that that it unabashedly is a superhero movie and isn't afraid to be.
Exactly. It embraces being a superhero movie. It's a little cheeky. Maybe, I've seen people throw the word cheesy out. And to that, all I can say is if you lived in 1984 and you're coherently aware of it, you understand the cheese element of it, because it was a cheesy time.
Yeah.
It really
It's the
was.
year I was born.
And you may not exactly remember how things worked back then, but I mean, at least you can probably follow my line of thought there.
But I'm cheesy as hell, is what I mean. Like,
Yeah. So I mean, there's a little tongue in cheek with it. There's some humor. But it embraces the superhero element, embraces the fantastical, and it certainly embraces the heart. And I really think that those elements were certainly present in the Donner Superman film. So again, that's one of the most widely praised movies out there for the superhero genre. I don't understand why this one is getting its ass kicked.
Yeah.
I don't.
And as I've seen, again, people, I think, we all love the first movie. I love the first movie. And I even said to you, Brendan, I even said it on my spoiler-free review. I was like, is it as good as the first one? No, I don't think it is. I think it's, it's a little messier than the first one. I think the first one was a little tighter, especially from a story standpoint. But I still think it's a worthy follow-up. But, I do get that people, like, if you watch the first one and you watch the second one, they do feel very different in tone. But guess what? Two things are very different in tone. World War I and the 80s. Those are very different tones. So the fact that those movies also would, to me, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been an interesting almost week since this movie hit, because it's the thing that's blown me away is, even things like, the big one for me that stands out, the glaring one is Empire magazine. Like, they're usually quite critical of anything DC, but will blow anything with a Marvel logo in front of it. And even on their latest podcast, like the crew on there, like they genuinely really like this movie. Like, they've got nothing but positive things to say about it. And, seeing that before going to see the movie and before it hitting, I was like, holy crap, like, and all the other reviews I'd heard, and like your review, Andy, and stuff, I'm like, man, this is cool. Like, this is better than I was expecting. Awesome. And then the last few days have happened, and it's just like, well, here we go on this merry-go-round again.
Yeah, here we go again. Exactly.
Life of a DC fan.
Yep.
What's the, sort of sins that for some reason are overlooked and given a free pass in other movies. When it comes to a DC movie, you're just absolutely crucified. So what are you going to do? I like it, and that's all I can really say is I like it.
Yeah.
I think it's a good movie. It's a fun Wonder Woman movie.
No, I completely agree.
I've maintained for years, it's almost been a mantra of mine, and I'm even going to tack something a little extra onto it as I say it this time. Like what you like, dislike what you dislike, never apologize for either, but also don't be a dick to everybody who doesn't share your opinion about it. Mm-hmm. And there's seems to be a lot of people not paying attention to that last part right now, and I've never been so glad to not have a Twitter account right now. I've just put it that way.
Yeah, you're not missing much. So, yeah, again, and for me, like, I'm watching the movie, and I'm like, as I was watching it again, that I just watched it today, so I'd already seen the very divisive reactions. And to be fair, I see a lot of people who love it, see a lot of people who hate it, and as usual, there's not much in the middle because it's the internet. The internet only lives in extremes. And so it's sad that it's almost like it takes me back to the BVS days when, like, everybody's like, oh, BVS, what an abomination, it's the worst thing ever. And then I went and saw it again, and I was like, I still like it. What's to hate? Like, and it's like I'm looking for the things to hate because now I've just heard too much of that. And I almost felt that way again watching this today as I was like watching it, and I was like, what? What's to hate about this? This is so entertaining.
That's exactly how I was last night.
Yeah.
I went in with more of a critical eye. And this is something, we'll probably talk about it when we do start talking about spoilers and stuff, but I don't know. When I go in to see these movies, particularly if it's one that I'm looking forward to, I wouldn't call it a bias, but I go in and sort of just get swept up in the story that they're telling me and the movie for what it is. And I'll either like it or not like it. And in this instance, I liked it. Like I was caught up in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And then, when you start seeing things online or reading people's opinions or reviews and stuff, like some legitimate criticisms, you go, oh, I didn't realize that. No, that's a fair point, whatever. But then some of these other things, I'm just like, how can you even be thinking of that sort of, like, are you actually watching the movie, or did you go in wanting to hate it? Or did you go in looking for things to nitpick? Because honestly, hand on heart, like, even Marvel movies that I do go in with an attitude of like, there's another one that everyone will just love. Like, I will just get caught up in the movie while I'm watching it. If it's one that's semi decent, and it's bizarre. Like the things that I don't notice when I'm actually watching it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. No, I agree. And that's just it. Is like, I think all your points are valid. Is like the movie. It's a really fun, entertaining superhero movie with a really nice theme, a really nice message that's consistent from the first frame to the last, which I think is really cool. And it's something unique. It's not something that I think has really been explored in a movie like this. It's not something you hear all the time, like the old Disney Be Yourself, which, you get all the time. This is something that's a little more unique. And I'm like, oh, that's an interesting take on where we wanted to tell a new Wonder Woman story. But yeah, I mean, I love the characters. I love the performances. I love the music. I love the action. I love the heart, the emotion, I mean, I guess I won't say it because spoilers, but it pulled the emotion out of me, in different places that I was really impressed with. And I thought that was great. So for me, all of those big things that make me love a movie are there. There, again, for me, some of the hiccups are just in the storytelling, where I felt like maybe they bit off a little more than they could chew. And in order to chew it, they took some shortcuts. And so there are just a couple little shortcuts in there where I as a storyteller or just as a film geek, I just kind of like, okay, that was a bit of a cheat, but all right, I'll go with you. Like stuff like that.
Jamie mentioned before polar opposites in reviews, and you mentioned the score. Like, that's another one. I've seen people saying that, even people who didn't necessarily like the movie think that the score's amazing. And then I've seen other people say that this is Zimmer's worst score and he phoned it in. And I'm just like, how is that possible? Like, how?
Listen, I will be as tolerant as humanly possible about so much stuff in here, because I recognize we're different people. We have different opinions, and that's just how it works. But again, if somebody wants to criticize this score when I can reach them, I will beat a mother effer with another mother effer.
It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah. I think the score is terrific. I love the score to the first film. I think it's amazing. I think the score to this film, also amazing. So, hey, I'm a happy guy as a score fan.
And they're so different, but
very
that's okay.
Different in tone. Yeah.
Composers are allowed to be different. I mean, I love John Williams' Star Wars stuff. I also love Ludwig Göransson's Star Wars stuff and The Mandalorian. They could not be more different than what they are, but they're both incredible as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and I still think they somehow complement each other, and I think same thing here. I mean, it didn't hurt that Rupert Gregson-Williams had worked with Hans Zimmer in the past. He incorporated Hans Zimmer's theme from Batman vs. Superman, so there's going to be some connective tissue between the two. But yeah, the scores have their own voices, but I think they both beautifully serve the movies that they're scoring. So I do want us to be able to get into all the spoilers. So I think we're all somewhere in the same neighborhood of we all really liked it, but like we have our own little nitpicks that keep us from saying, oh, we loved it, or thinking that it was quite the home run that the first film was. I'll be interested to hear what those things are for you guys and to see if we match up on those at all. But we all really liked it.
I'm betting no, but we'll see.
Yeah. So if you're one of those folks out there who hated it and were tuning in, hoping we would hate it too, sorry to disappoint, but we liked it. Hey, what are you going to do? As Jamie just said, like what you like is what it is. But for us, I thought it was a really damn good sequel, and I really enjoyed it both times I've watched it now. So we are going to get into spoilers. So you have been warned. hit pause now, go check out Wonder Woman 1984. But again, chances are you already have. But want to get that warning out there. So there you go. Spoilers are in effect in 3, 2, 1. Okay, spoilers are okay. Jamie, you gonna jump to the end?
I was just about to say.
I am. You all may not remember because it's been so long, but this is how I do things. Hans Zimmer is my MVP because bringing back Beautiful Lie for that little climax sequence,
Yeah,
loved it.
Yeah,
That was pretty amazing.
I almost wish like that. Unfortunately, got spoiled before the movie came out. I think he said it in an interview.
that.
Yeah, he said it in an interview or something, and so I saw it making its way around Twitter of like, oh, Hans Zimmer used A Beautiful Lie in Wonder Woman 1984. And so, yeah, unfortunately, I got spoiled. But yeah, like, what an awesome moment. And I just loved the thematic connection between, like, A Beautiful Lie, the beginning of Batman vs. Superman, and then this was all about the beautiful truth. I thought that was so cool.
Yeah.
I wondered if that was what it was called on the soundtrack, because I still haven't listened to the soundtrack just, off and by itself yet. But
Correct me if I'm wrong. Have you listened to the score, Andy?
It's called Truth, not The Beautiful Truth.
Okay.
I a little bit, but I've been so wrapped up in Christmas music up until now that I haven't really listened to it too much. So now that it is New Year's, I will finally dive back into it.
Because I kind of skipped through it to try and find that track, and I couldn't.
Oh, maybe it's not even in the. Maybe it's not on the score.
That's what I thought. I think maybe it's not actually in there, because I skimmed through. Oh, what were the tracks? Because I was trying to sort of explain it to Jess last night that how they used that song, and I was trying to find it in the score. Like I went through Truth, Beauty's What It Is, Lord of Desire, Radio Waves, Already Gone. Like I kind of went through the whole, third act of the movie, and I couldn't find it in the score. So I think it's not there.
Okay, that makes sense.
Well, phooey on it then.
Well, darn it. Never mind. Yeah, I just assumed it was one of those last tracks that was Truth or The Beauty and What It Is or What There Is. So, yes, like what a cool thing. Again, I wish it had stayed a surprise, but yeah, like beautifully used in those final moments with Diana and Max. That was really cool.
Speaking of that climax scene involving that, I've watched this film 3 times, and I ain't even too proud to say I've cried at that scene all 3 times. All 3.
I didn't cry, but it was like I
wasn't Niagara Falls or
yeah.
anything, but like it definitely misty.
Sure.
Is this during when they play A Beautiful Lie?
Yes. Yeah, that whole thing where she's giving that speech and the
And how cool is it that when she stops talking to Max and then turns to the camera and starts talking to us? I thought that was so cool.
I mean, Truth is it's the theme of, the takeaway for me is that obviously the first movie was about love, and this movie is her sort of, I wouldn't say turning her back on love, but her letting go of love and embracing truth. And the truth theme is there from that opening, scene on Themyscira. Like it's about her cheating and accepting the fact that she was going to win, but it wouldn't have been true. Mm-hmm. And that they're the sort of things that jumped out at me more the second viewing. Is like, oh man, yeah, they really seeded this from the start.
Yeah,
But it's and I have no problem with that theme at all. Like, you talk about you getting misty there. Like for me, twice that I've watched it, I know it's been talked about a lot online, is the goodbye scene with her and Steve, and the way she is walking away from that and the emotion she's showing and everything. Like that's emotionally, that's very powerful. But for me, the scene, like I was just being like, I didn't have tears in my eyes, but I was beaming in the theater. It was directly after that when she flies for the first time. Like I was, to me, look, it's not the same, and I'm not saying it's the same, but to me, that moment in terms of how it made me feel is this movie's No Man's Land.
Yeah.
Like if I pop this movie on and just want to go to a scene that I love, it's going to be that first flight. Like, it makes me feel like No Man's Land did. It makes me feel of, the same feelings that I had during Man of Steel, during, Superman's first flight in that one. And yeah, I was absolutely grinning from ear to ear and just a well of emotion in the cinema the first time I saw that. It was fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that whole sequence, I think, is my favorite sequence in the film because, but starting with the goodbye, that last conversation between her and Steve. I think
Definitely.
That's so beautifully played, beautifully done. And that's what I was saying as I was going to say, but I stopped myself before the spoiler wall, is I'm like, somehow Patty Jenkins and Gal Gadot and Chris Pine got me to cry at saying goodbye to Steve Trevor again. Like, they got me the first time saying goodbye to Steve Trevor. Now they got me again in the second movie. Damn them. But it's so well done. And when he says, or she says, I can't say goodbye. And he says, you don't have to because I'm already gone. Oh, like that just hit me so hard in the heart. Because it's like, yeah, saying goodbye to anyone you've lost in your life. Like, immediately reflect on loved ones who've passed on where you don't get to say goodbye. And the answer is you don't have to. Like, the truth is they're gone. Like, that is, and then again, having to accept that truth. God, like, I think that's so well done. And then, yes, the fact that it leads into her renouncing the wish and then taking off and then learning to fly right after. And really the way her learning to fly is making Steve a permanent part of her. So even though he's already gone, now he has taught her something that she will keep with her for the rest of her life. And so the way the one scene segues into the other, and you're right, the flying sequence I think is beautiful, and it is the closest thing in this film that gets to be the No Man's Land moment. And I've seen a little criticism of like, oh, there's nothing as good as No Man's Land. Well, to your point, like, No Man's Land was lightning in a bottle. It just immediately became
They didn't try to do it, and that I kind of respect that because you can't. I think they knew.
You're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't.
The first movie. Exactly.
If you try to replicate that scene in a new way, everyone goes, "Oh, they're just trying to do No Man's Land again." Instead, they didn't do that. And they try to make another very powerful moment with her learning to fly, and I think it's really effective. It doesn't feel like No Man's Land; it feels like its own thing. And so then you got people going, "Oh, well, there's nothing as good as No Man's Land." Like, again, you can't win either way. I think this was the better choice, though. Instead of trying to replicate something that you can't replicate, it was special in the first one. You got to do something new for this one. And again, the way it really spoke to her journey and her having to say goodbye to Steve again, I think it's triumphant, it's beautiful, and again, it's her making him a permanent part of her in a way that she never has before. I think it's great.
Yeah, I mean, look, let's be honest. The safe bet for this movie, because I watched the first Wonder Woman on Christmas Day, because obviously with the time difference and stuff, it didn't come out here till the 26th. But I rewatched the first one on Christmas Day, and I did catch myself during it going, man, I know I'm not going to get it, but I'd love to see more of this team together, because their chemistry and just the characters were fantastic. The safe bet would have been to do a World War II movie.
Yeah.
Keep that going. Maybe not have Steve come back or have him come back through some wit. I don't know. But then you open yourself up to two criticisms. One, they're just kind of repeating themselves with doing a different war, which kind of technically they do with 84, but, to a lesser extent. And then also but we've seen this in Captain America, the first Avenger. So they didn't do the safe bet, which, I mean, look, based on, the photos that you see in her apartment, you see them in World War II liberating a concentration camp. I mean, would I love to see that happen, like actually on screen in front of me? Hell yeah, I would. But they didn't take the safe bet. They acknowledged that these things had happened, but they went a complete 180 in a different direction. And I kind of respect the hell out of them for that, because they didn't play it safe and they really could have.
Well, and
Well,
you're right.
I mean, you also put yourself in a box if you went that approach, because what do you do for the third movie then? Vietnam?
Vietnam, yeah.
right.
Like,
And then
yeah.
Wonder Woman's basically a war trilogy.
Yeah.
And I really don't think that's the story they're trying to tell.
Yeah.
No.
And I loved those nods to the first film in the opening where you saw those photos, you saw those things, especially the photo of her with elderly Etta Candy. That was what a great touch. I
That's
love
5
that.
seconds of screen time. One of my favorite things in the whole movie.
Yeah, it's awesome. So no, it's a great point, Brendan, is like, yeah, they could have just done World War II. They could have brought back the crew, aged them up a bit, but like, yeah. But at that point, it feels too much like a retread. And so again, I respect that stuff happened, but I appreciate, checking in on them here and really allowing this movie to be its own thing.
Yeah.
You mentioned it earlier, but the opening sequence in Themyscira was amazing.
good.
Amazing.
That's
And
that sequence is titled Amazonian Ninja Warrior.
yes. And the music is great. The Hans Zimmer score for that is amazing with the choir and everything. It's so great. It's so great to revisit Themyscira and to see Antiope and Hippolyta again, to see little Diana,
Revisit it, but
little
also
Lily
not
Diana.
not retread old things. Like, we saw areas of Themyscira that we didn't see in the first movie.
Yeah, but it still was very consistent. And
Yes.
I loved, again, it sets up the theme from the very start of like how important truth really is, in the grand scheme of things. It's like, yeah, you can cheat and win, but it doesn't mean anything.
Okay,
But
so involving this, and this will be the first of several things that I'm going to bring up that could be a reach. It could just be, coincidence. It could be people seeing what they want to see because of the baggage that they bring with them. But do you gentlemen believe that it's coincidental that when Zack and Deborah Snyder's names show up as producers, the audience stands up and cheers in the background?
I
No.
noticed
'Cause I
that the first time out, and I did have a little chuckle to myself.
I did not notice that because I noticed that Deborah's name came first.
That part I didn't really.
Yeah,
pay
in all the credits, the women's name are first. They get top billing.
Oh, cool. I did not pick up on that. Excellent.
But no, I didn't notice that, but I did notice the crowd cheering, and I had a little to myself in the theater.
It could be coincidence, but the way that Patty loves and respects Zach and Deb, I don't think so.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't pick up on it, but that's a great point. But to speak again to the action, like the way this whole whatever obstacle course thing, competition, the way it's shot is so impressive to me. It was so exciting. It was so well done. And again, like I was watching this action sequence as soon as we start the movie, and I just was like, man, she is killing it here. And so again, later when I heard people go, oh, she's not a good action director, I was like, what? What were you watching? Like this is just the first sequence in the film, and I think from an action standpoint, it's amazing. I mean, it's also great from a storytelling standpoint. It's important. It's a great revisit of stuff that we liked in the first film, but it also serves this story. But man, like just from an action direction standpoint, it's so well done.
I liked how in the first movie, what we saw of the Amazonians and stuff, it was really, I mean, you could argue it's one and the same, but like we really got to see their fighting ability, whereas in this one, it was their athletic ability.
Yeah.
Like it was the same but different. So I appreciated that.
Well, and a couple other, I love that as soon as we check in on the Amazonians preparing for this competition, you see them doing things with ropes and lassos that we had not seen before. Because for the rest of the movie, we're going to see Diana do things with her lasso that we had never seen her do before. So they were setting that up from the very beginning of like, oh,
it's a character in this movie. I mean, she used it a bit in the first one, but in this one, like it's part of her. It's an extension of her.
But
I see all these women swinging around, and all I could think to myself watching it was, Andy's going to love this movie. And then as it progresses and there's just more and more swinging in the movie, I'm like, this is Andy's favorite movie of all time.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. But again, because she uses the lasso in ways that we had never seen before, I love that she seeds it in the opening of like, oh, these are skills that the Amazons do learn. So that way when we see Wonder Woman do it later, it's not like, well, since when can she do that? Like, we know that that's part of the training. Mm-hmm. Which I thought was very clever. That's
part of it. And also, if you want to really make a stretch, and you know, I'm going to make several as we go throughout this conversation. They established that she spent time at the Trevor Ranch, and lassos are a big thing used in cattle ranches. So, who's to say she didn't pick up a few things there as well?
I didn't really think of that.
Together, yeah.
And then the way they set up, oh my God, what's her name? They set up the hero, the golden armor, Asperia.
Asperia.
The way they set up Asperia in that opening, where there's the statue of her in the golden eagle armor, and you know Hippolyta even says, you know, she became a hero because of whatever, being selfless and true, and et cetera, et cetera. So setting that up from the very beginning, so that way later on when that armor comes into play, I do think it was a little convenient that like, oh yeah, I've had it. It's here. It's just here in my closet, just waiting for a special occasion. Like, I think that's, you know, a little convenient, but at least it had been set up in a way where you go, oh yeah, like I remember seeing that on Themyscira. That's a part of their culture. And then when she sets it up, like, yeah, here's the story behind it. You go with it, so that way when she shows up in it at the end, it feels a little more natural.
I did have that moment of, how the hell did she get it? Like, we saw her leave Themyscira, but they make a point of saying it was in Man's World.
Yes.
So
yes.
She actually explains that to him when he sees it leaning up against the wall in her apartment. She says she scoured the earth looking for Asteria and could never find her. All she could find was the armor.
Right. And as soon as we had that little flashback, and they showed the armor and they just showed the eyes, I was like, oh, I bet that's Linda Carter.
See, I didn't pick up on that. Even
I
Jess,
didn't either. That was a complete shock to me at the end.
In the movie, but Jess in the cinema, she told me after, she's like, didn't you pick up on that? I'm like, no. So yeah, she was onto it straight away. She said, yeah, it was totally Linda Carter's eyes.
Oh,
but
yeah.
I had the real surprise at the end. I was not onto it at all until that final scene.
Well,
since that door just got kicked open, I'm just going to go ahead and step through. Everybody's heard me say my favorite thing in the first Wonder Woman movie is when she tells Charlie, but who will sing for us, and then flashes him that smile, and that buckles my knees, and I still can't stand up straight because of it, because my knees are still weak. This movie at the end where Linda turns to the camera and just gives that wink and then flings her hair and walks away, I melted on my couch when that happened.
Well, it's funny because in that flashback, I was like, "Oh my God, that's got to be Linda Carter, right?" And then, as the movie was like wrapping up, I did go, really, a second Wonder Woman movie, and you still didn't give a cameo to Linda Carter? Like, I kept waiting.
I thought that, and
because they've been so chummy with her, you know, like
yes,
Gal and Patty are always like they're always tweeting at her, and she popped up in the fandom panel, and I was like, how did you not find a spot for her in this second movie? Come on. And then the post-credit scene, or the mid-credit scene, happened, and I was like, oh, thank God, woo! And yeah, it's what a terrific moment, like great thing for her, where they can bring her back if they want to, or they can just leave it as is. But like, I'm glad that they really, instead of her just walking into the party and them going, you know, hubba hubba, who is that? Like giving her a true character that's part of the Amazonians, I thought was a really awesome tribute.
Yeah, and like I've been doing this for years or whatever she says, but yeah, I thought the same thing during the movie. I'm like, how have they not, like, surely Linda Carter could have had a cameo, like, as you said, it's like it's someone at the party or a worker at the museum,
right,
or someone in the mall or something like that. And then, yeah, like at the end, I was just, I cheered. I was like, yeah, that is amazing. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it was really cool. But I'm just so annoyed that Jess was onto it, and it completely caught me off guard. Like I was so shocked at that final mid-credit scene, but I loved every second of it. It was so cool. Damn, she looks good.
Patty's idea or whoever's, somebody needs a huge hug and a pat on the back for making her like the ultimate Amazon warrior and not just giving her some throwaway cameo.
Right.
I know that's kind of what's being said, but I want to emphasize that I love that there is the possibility, as Andy said, to either leave it just as it is because it was so great, or there's a wide open door for the third one where Asteria and Diana can team up.
I'm of two minds of that, hey. Like, it's kind of perfect how it is, but then there's that other part of me that's like, oh, I'd love to see them fight,
Side
fight
by
together
side.
on screen.
Oh,
That would be amazing.
I mean, I'm just saying the idea's been rolling around in my head for a couple of days, and third movie to have Asteria and Diana team up against Cheetah and Giganta.
Oh.
Shit.
Count me in.
That would be cool.
Yeah, I agree. Speaking of Cheetah, we all said we liked Kristen Wiig's performance. I think, I agree. I liked when she popped up, and again, I've seen a bit of it online where it's sort of they made her mousy, they messed up her hair and gave her glasses, and I get that, and I don't think that's
pretty ugly girl.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. But what I liked is I was concerned that Kristen Wiig would play it a little too broad, a little too big, a little too much. And what I appreciated is that she kept it dialed down enough where it was a little funny, it was a little entertaining, but she never went cartoony. She kept it real. So even though she was awkward and she was, and she wasn't confident and everything, like she never allowed herself to go too big, like we've seen in similar roles in other superhero movies. She kept it on the right side of the line where she still felt like a real person. And then really allowing that transformation to be so gradual throughout the movie was, I thought was a cool choice. I also do understand that people go, I wanted more Cheetah. I agree with that. I get that. So I see both sides. Like I liked watching that character continue to change throughout the film until we got that final reveal of Cheetah, who I think the design on Cheetah was perfect. I think you couldn't have gotten a better live action design. But again, I also do understand people like, oh, I wish she'd have gotten there quicker because we could have gotten more of full-on Cheetah. But I think Wiig's performance, throughout was really terrific. And just watching her, get more confident, but get a little harder edged, get a little more selfish. And just as that went, and then by the end where she's in full Cheetah garb, and she's just straight up mean, and she pulled it off. So overall, I was really happy with the way that character came to life.
Connell and I had this discussion in the spoiler thread in the Real Fans group. He talked about it's time to bury the trope of the glasses and the nerdiness, because we've seen it with, Guy Pearce and Jamie Foxx and, half a dozen other people over the, Jim Carrey. It's a trope. I mean, there's unquestionably a trope there about the nerdy scientist becoming badass bad guy, but as far as I'm concerned, Kristen Wiig is now the gold standard for that trope.
Mm-hmm.
I think she played it perfectly. I don't think she ever went over the top, as you said. I think she evolved that character over time. It wasn't, it was a gradual thing. It wasn't just a flip of the switch and she's there.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is as well done as that trope can be.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Do you guys? I don't know if it to be a criticism or a nitpick, but I would have liked to have, I'm a little bit disappointed her full transformation happened off screen. I probably would have liked to have seen that sort of metamorphosis, if that's the correct term, happen on screen. Like you kind of see her,
You need like an American Werewolf in London thing in there? Is that what you wanted?
I don't know, just something, because you sort of see her lean up against a pillar and she's still Barbara, and then the next time you see her, she's full on she's animal.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I just kind of would, even just a bit of middle ground, not necessarily full, Michael Jackson Thriller or American Werewolf, transformation, but something in there.
When I watched the movie the first time, I didn't even think of it because I loved the reveal when Diana shows up and you just see the silhouette of the cheetah up there. And you get Diana's reaction. So I thought that was a great reveal. So it didn't even cross my mind. And then again, someone on Twitter said, I would have loved to actually have seen the transformation. And I think they even referenced American Werewolf. And I went, you know what? I didn't think of it, but that would have been cool. I think that's a valid point. It didn't bother me. It certainly wasn't something where I went, we've been cheated. Cheated. But the point is valid. I'm like, yeah, actually that could have been cool to get some sort of transformation.
Even when she leaned up against the pillar, if it was something like they zoomed in on her hand, you could see it like starting to develop claws or something like, not a full body transformation, but just sort of something alluding to the fact that, oh shit, like, this is happening.
Right.
But otherwise, fine.
Yeah.
I just would have liked to have seen more of her, But
sure.
that's kind of a trope as well. Like, your villain, fully formed, shows up at the end of the movie, and you kind of just get that one big confrontation.
The one fight, yeah.
Yeah,
and
essentially, Batman '89 did that. Really,
I loved the fight, though. The Wonder Woman Cheetah fight. Oh, I thought was awesome.
Look, this is another one too where the criticism I've seen is kind of off the charts, but this is look, not just for this movie. I'm talking any movie, unless it's really, really, really obvious. I don't notice bad CGI. I just don't.
It's not. Here's the thing. It's not bad CGI. That's the thing. It's not bad CGI. I thought it looked good. Can you still tell it's CGI? Sure. Do you know why? Because there's no such thing as cheetah humans. It's not bad CGI.
I think when I notice it's CGI, it's just my brain going, well, it's not real. Like, of course, it's not going to look 100% authentic. But,
well,
I
just
don't notice that.
That for the close-ups on Cheetah, though, it was Kristen Wiig in makeup. Like, I was glad that they didn't CGI her face or anything. Like, it was her in Cheetah makeup. Mm-hmm. Like, I thought they did a great job with it, so...
My cousin's husband said to me years ago, and it completely changed my perspective on the whole special effects thing. This was, still kind of at the early stages of the comic book movie craze. In fact, it was about the time probably the first or second Spider-Man movie came out. And we were talking, and I was like, the special effects in the movie, they look good, but, there were a few scenes. And he's like, I'm watching a movie about comic book characters. I want them to look like comic book characters. I want them to do comic booky things. So if it looks a little bit like a comic book, instead of like a guy in a red suit swinging between buildings, I'm good with that. Mm-hmm. And I thought, that's fascinating. And then, my perspective of it kind of evolved a little bit after that. I would rather see them make these characters do these fantastic things that are impossible to do in any way other than doing it in some visual special effect. I would rather see them put the effort in to make it look like something amazing like that than try to shortcut it by doing it with, lines and stunt work and everything like that. And that's no disrespect to stunt work, because there's incredible stunt work being done to this very day in Hollywood. But there are simply things that are not achievable without these digital special effects that we've had the last 20 or so years, 30 years, whatever it's been. I would rather see them put the effort forth to make it there and maybe fall just short of photorealism than I would for them not to try it at all.
Sure.
And you've heard me say this about the CW shows, because obviously there are budget restrictions there, but I appreciate the effort maybe more than the final product in some of those cases. And here, I don't have any complaints about the CGI. As Andy said, yes, there are obviously things you can look at and go, yeah, that's CGI, but so what?
Yeah.
Who cares?
Mm-hmm. Well, and for me, the rule is just, does it distract me? And now I'm not watching the movie. There are certain movies where, the effects are so bad that I'm all of a sudden not paying attention to the story, and I've kind of checked out. For me, that never happened. For me, I was like, oh man, Wonder Woman versus Cheetah, here we go. Like, does my brain know it's CGI? Yeah, of course. I spend way too much of my free time talking about these things. Of course I know it's CGI, but for me, it was never distracting to the point where I checked out. I was into it. I was into the fight.
I think you just articulated what I was trying to say before. Like, yeah, unless it's really noticeable for me, I don't care really. Like, if it doesn't distract me from the movie, then
away we go. Yeah. So
I'll give you a perfect example of what I'm trying to say with this whole CGI thing. Okay. I don't know if you guys are current on Mandalorian or even Brendan. I don't even think you're watching it, and that's
I don't
cool.
watch
That's
it,
fine.
no.
That's fine. The closing sequence of the season 2 finale of The Mandalorian, there are points in there where you can clearly see that CGI, and maybe even argue that it's not the greatest CGI in the world. Do you know how many complaints I've seen anybody levy against that? 0. And you know why? Because everybody loved that crap so much they forgave it, because that's the only way that could have been done without doing some really cheesy makeup stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Andy, I don't know if you've watched it, so I don't know if you even know what I'm talking about.
I know exactly what you're talking about, but I'm still 2 episodes behind. But
I've never
it's
watched
fine.
it, and I know what you're talking
Yeah,
about.
it's fine. I
I'm
get
just
it.
saying, I've seen 0 complaints levied against that. I've seen dozens of complaints levied against Wonder Woman for basically the same thing. And I don't think that's a fair comparison. Unless the character in The Mandalorian is more beloved than Wonder Woman, which I guess you could make that argument, but whatever. I'm not going to get into the whole thing. I'm just saying, excuse me, I think there are double standards in some areas in film and TV these days that I simply don't agree with or approve of.
Yeah. I mean,
Putting it mildly.
we all know that. I want to talk about Cheetah more, but not necessarily the CGI, because here I got a theory. This is more story things. It's a kind of a theory of the whole movie. So, I think the wishes that were made before Maxwell Lord got his hand on the stone are independent of all the wishes that came after Maxwell Lord got his hands on the stone and became the stone. So
I agree.
So Barbara's wish was its own thing. Diana's wish was its own thing. And then Maxwell Lord's wish sort of became a catch-all bucket for every wish that came after. So I feel like when Maxwell renounced his wish, it sort of removed all the consequences from all the wishes he granted. But it did not affect Diana's. Diana, she renounced hers on her own. And it only affected the second half of Cheetah's transformation, because he gave the second transformation to her, but the first one was her wish. So at the end, we never see her renounce her wish. So even though she is now human again, she's no longer the fully animalistic Cheetah. I think where we leave her, and they leave it up in the air, she still has the strength and confidence and powers that she had before she transformed.
I fully agree. And just to back that up even further, Maxwell Lord took something in return, because, the thing takes what you value most or whatever when you make the wish. And then, he was granting wishes in exchange for A for B, whatever. Diana made her wish on the stone, and it basically cost her her powers.
Yeah.
He didn't gain her powers.
Well, right.
So that just further backs up what you're saying, that as the stone versus as Maxwell Lord, it's separate from each other.
Yes. So Patty Jenkins someone asked her on Twitter, like, hey, are we going to get more Cheetah? And she just said, we'll see, winky face. So she is teased that, we might not be done with the Cheetah. And I do think that the movie leaves in a place where Barbara Minerva can absolutely become Cheetah again. I still think, again, because we never see her renounce her wish, she still might have the first set of powers, and then she just has to find a way to get back to full Cheetah. So I hope we do get more of her. I do want more of her. I thought she was great, and so I just thought it was an interesting place to leave her character. But to get to the rules of the wishes, that was the thing on the first viewing that I was a little squishy on, and then on the second viewing, it worked a lot better for me. Is that the first time I watched it, where as soon as Maxwell Lord, absorbed the stone and he became the stone and he started granting wishes, and he goes, well, and then I'm going to take all your holdings and you are going to get moved out of my way. And then it happened, and I was like, wait, how did he make that happen? That's not a wish. And then same thing with the other ones. Like, I will take I'll take your security people, and they just go with him. And I was like, wait, there's like a rule here that has not been explained. And so the first time I saw it, I was a little like, but then watching it a second time, is that like, if you wish on the stone, you get your wish, but the stone chooses what it takes from you. And so in the case of Barbara, it took her humanity, her compassion, and for Diana, it took her powers. And it's a gradual thing. Like, as your wish comes true, whatever it takes from you sort of continues to be taken. But because Maxwell becomes the stone, he gets to choose what he takes from you. So the stone chose for Barbara and Diana, but Max gets to make a conscious decision of what he gets to take from you. So the rules are there, and they are consistent. It does make sense, but the first time I watched it, I just was like, I feel like that could have been explained a little better.
Yeah.
There are a lot of things that this movie probably could have gone out of its way to clear up or explain, but the flip side of that is I appreciate it when a filmmaker doesn't feel like they have to hold my hand for 2.5 hours.
Oh, totally. And that's what I'm saying is on a second viewing, I'm like, oh, it all makes sense. It does. I'm with it. And so that bothered me. Again, it didn't even bother me the first time so much as I just went, wait a minute, like, is there something I'm missing? Is there something I'm not getting? And I did think to myself, I'm like, oh, I kind of wish they'd have set up this stone and what it did at the beginning so that way we would know what was happening. But then, again, on second viewing, I actually really appreciated that they introduced this stone. We figure out it grants wishes, but then we have to discover its history and what it does and what's the catch, and we have to discover that with Diana. So that way we don't spend the whole movie 2 steps ahead of Wonder Woman. We actually get to spend the movie figuring it out with Wonder Woman, which I think is actually the better choice.
Just to sort of jump back briefly, I read the whole cheetah thing like Barbara a little differently, because I know, like, they said that everyone gets 1 wish, but then she gets 2. But I mean, Max does say that he's feeling generous, to give her another one. I took her saying, I don't want to be like anybody else anymore. I want to be
renouncing her wish, and
that's how I took it. Is she was actually renouncing that first wish, but then replacing it with, I want to be the apex predator.
I think either one is acceptable, and I can roll with either. I'm not going to say which one's definitive, but
yeah, like she didn't
I think
say the words,
I
I renounce my wish, but she did say, I don't want this anymore. I want, XYZ.
Interesting. I didn't think of that, but
the ability of her to be, mid-tier cheetah like we had in the White House scene.
Yes.
But if the third movie is what I'm hoping it will be, and again, I ain't Patty Jenkins. They ain't paying me to do this. But my hope is, I've heard murmurings, I don't know if they're from any legitimate sources or where it came from, that, excuse me, the third movie's already in the works and they're going for a contemporary setting. And if this contemporary setting is Barbara, 35 years later, whatever it is, 40 years later, going through like the jungles of Brazil trying to track down this god whose name I can't even pronounce. I've read it in the comics. I've never heard it said out loud. That is actually the one that bestowed the cheetah powers upon her in the comics. Then it makes sense. She's driven virtually mad for 40 years of her life doing this research, trying to figure out where else she can get this power back. It has that door open for that to happen.
Yeah. No, both good points, and they can certainly take it however they like. So interesting. Yeah, some things I hadn't really thought of.
We need to talk about Steve. And
okay.
Hang on.
I don't really want to.
There are all kinds of things flying out there about contradictions, inconsistencies, and everything else. And I don't want to get into a whole, dance-off challenge here about the whole thing, but Wonder Woman could fly the whole time. Okay. Tell me, how did she show up in front of Batman in BVS to stop Doomsday from blasting him? Is there anything to contradict the idea that she flew there and dropped down at that moment?
No.
Is there any moment in Justice League where she needed to fly?
Not really.
I mean,
they had the jet, so she didn't have to.
I hadn't thought about that, but honestly, with what she does in BVS and Justice League, and then whatever we'll see in Zack Snyder's Justice League, no, I don't think it ever contradicts it. I always thought that even in the first Wonder Woman, she almost flies multiple times. And so Wonder Woman and her power of flight has always been somewhat inconsistent. Like, usually in the comics she flies, but like in other media, because of the invisible jet, because the invisible jet became such a well-known aspect of her character thanks to Super Friends, and even the Linda Carter show, oftentimes in other media they remove her ability to fly because they're like, well, but she's got the invisible jet, and that way she's not just Superman. So sometimes she flies, sometimes she doesn't. It changes. But in the movies, she's always almost flown. And so for this movie to just go, you know what, let's just let's confirm it. Yes, she can fly, but let's actually make it part of her arc. I think that was great.
She doesn't fly like Superman though. Like, she still needs something to propel her, and then she's just she's riding the air currents and stuff like that.
Exactly.
Like, she's not.
It's not the power of
Superman.
flight that she has. Yeah. And this sounds almost silly to say out loud, but I mean, this is really kind of how the movie presents it. She has to use real world dynamics and everything in order to achieve flight. Mm-hmm. It's not a thing where she can just like zoom right up off the ground and rocks levitate behind her or anything else. She has to actually get up there by means of the lasso or being, catapulted, whatever. And then she's manipulating winds and airflow and everything else. And that's how she's doing it, which to me is interesting. I think that's a fascinating concept, because what superhero have we seen do that?
Yeah,
that's he also explained the gold armor at the end, instead of it just being, it's the final scene, so we're going to put the hero in a new costume. I took it as, okay, she knows how to do this now. She's got a suit there with friggin' wings on it. She's using that. Like, that's what I took away from the golden armor, because she didn't know that she was going to face
a cheetah.
Yeah. And speaking of which too, the whole, like, just sorry to go off on a tangent, but the whole golden armor thing, how, it withstood the force essentially of, the army of Spartans and everything. And then, Cheetah just rips it apart. But again, Barbara says
she's superhuman.
She doesn't want to be like she said, anyone or anything. Like, she wants to be unique, and that, to me, that explains that as well, because these are just little nitpicks that I've been seeing online, and since watching it again, I'm like, no, they don't put it all on Front Street, but they do. There's an explanation.
There's logic there.
Yeah, exactly.
Then we have the thing about the invisible jet, which I thought was cool as shit, by the way. That whole sequence was excellent. And we can certainly circle back around to that. But I've seen people have entire conversations about, she can just conveniently do magic now. Did you not listen to the explanation leading up to that they had literally 10 seconds before? Where she says for 50 years she's been trying to master how to do this, and she actually did it to a coffee cup, which she lost, which was terrible.
That was hilarious.
She's literally the daughter of a god. Why would you not expect her to be able to do something like that? I don't understand. To me, again, I think this is just somebody trying to fling shit and seeing if it sticks.
Okay.
I don't agree.
Okay, guys.
Is it silly? That's arguable. That's all a matter of your perspective, but I don't think that there's not the logic present as she presented it before they turned the jet invisible.
This is one of my issues. And I hadn't heard anyone else complain about it, but this is one of my issues. 2 issues with this sequence. Issue number 1 is the way, like, I get where it's like, we need to get on a plane, we need to get to Cairo, but I get it. She works for the Smithsonian. She has access to places. And when she walks in, I tried to read the writing, and I think it said like aircraft archive or something like that.
Yeah.
And okay, I can buy that the Smithsonian has a whole aircraft section that she would have access to. But that doesn't mean the aircrafts would be functional and fueled up and ready to go on a runway.
Well, I mean, if there's clearly a runway present there, there's obviously air traffic control there. I can roll with that logic. the logic I can't roll with is, where's the damn security?
I can't. I'm sorry. It's Smithsonian is by definition part of a museum, which means these aircraft would be part of a museum, which means they wouldn't be full of fuel and ready to fly at a moment's notice.
Probably not. But I'm just saying, it's established that there is a runway there. They're going to take off from a functioning runway. Whether or not that's logical to be part of the Smithsonian or not, I can't say. But again, she's using a key access card. Number one, I'm pretty sure even in 1984, the technology would have existed to recognize whose key card just opened that door.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And number two, you have jets that in 1984 are still worth millions of dollars. You don't have a fat, half-drunk security guard sleeping at a desk somewhere?
Yeah.
They're just wide open?
These are things that in movies like this, I just kind of go with. Like, they have to get you from point A to point B, so this is how they've decided to do it. But I mean, in saying that, I mean, there's a lot of military bases that have museums on site, you know. They're functioning military things that just happen to have, like, they have that historical part. To me, the museum aspect of it was him, you know, walking through the hangar part or whatever, and then when they get out on the runway, that's more, this is a functional base. But yes, there would be security, and there would be this and that, and how was there enough fuel in it, and all that kind of shit. That sort of stuff in these, like, that sort of thing doesn't bother me. And I don't know, these are sorts of things that I've always felt weren't ever really an issue in movies until stuff like The Dark Knight that went out of its way to explain everything. I can just kind of go with it. I don't know.
I mean, you have to, and that's my point. Is for me, like you said, they've got to get from point A to point B. For me, this was a narrative shortcut where, if you think about it for more than a second, you go, I don't think it works. But you just kind of have to go with it. So that was, to me, I was like, wait, what? As a museum scientist, how do you have access to fueled up jets on a runway? Like that, there's a break in logic there for me. And I just kind of went, okay, I don't know about that. But sure, we got to get in a jet. We got to go to Egypt. Okay, that's fine, whatever. And then we get in the jet, and when they're like, oh, you know, she's like, oh, I didn't, you know, radar, they will see us no matter what. And Chris Pine's...
Well, shit, Diana.
Yeah, Chris Pine's reading of, well, shit, Diana is amazing. And I knew where they were going, which is great. Invisible jet. We all wanted to see it. I'm into it. Great. And to Jamie's point, the logic is sound. The logic of when Diana says, my father was able to hide, you know, our home island for years, and I've been, you know, and so I've been trying to figure out how to do the same. So using that power that had been set up in the past, that's how you hide Themyscira, because it hides it not only from just sight, but also from detection. To use that power to create the invisible jet, great. Logic is sound. I'm with you. The fact that it's not mentioned until the moment where she needs to make an airplane disappear, I was like, oh, okay. Like, there's no setup
there's
for
no
it.
Question about that.
It's just awfully convenient. And again, the logic is fine. It just could have been executed a little better. It's a little clumsy the way it's like, oh, by the way, my dad also made an island disappear, so I'm going to make this plane disappear. And you're like, well, thank God that happened just now, because otherwise we'd have been screwed.
I don't know. If point A is them getting to the, you know, the Smithsonian, B is her, you know, making the jet invisible. If those are the points that we have to get to point C, which is them in the invisible jet flying through the fireworks, I can go with it, because I thought that was awesome.
Well,
I absolutely loved that scene.
Well,
The visuals of them flying under the fireworks were incredible, but when he goes up and they can see them through the clouds illuminating, that to me was I love that.
Yeah,
I loved it.
Once the jet disappears and we get the sequence of them flying through the fireworks, it's awesome. I love the sequence. I love where we get. It's just two very large plot conveniences to get us there. And usually I'm like, is it set up? Are the rules there? And these are two where I just went, they're kind, you know.
I mean, if you want to go down the
They're
rabbit hole of
shortcuts.
things that don't entirely make sense,
An invisible
I'm pretty
jet's up
sure
there.
there were more than just a couple of buttons that were changed between aeronautics in 1917 and 1984. So the fact that
Yeah.
Steve could just within a matter of seconds be able to figure all those controls out and then handle the difference in a, single engine prop plane to a twin engine fighter jet, just like that. I mean, I guess maybe, but I don't know.
Yeah.
But again, are we going to go with this to be entertained, or are we going to nitpick everything about the movie?
I mean, how do you explain an invisible jet? Let's be honest. Like,
No, you're missing the point. The explanation is good. The execution and the plot conveniences to get us there are bad.
yeah, no, I know what you mean. But to me, it's just kind of like, yes, the logic of how you do it makes sense, but how do you sort of bring that element into the story?
Right.
It's never going to be easy.
No, I
don't
mean,
think,
but
because it is such
you said it up
far-out
earlier.
concept.
You set it up
Yeah.
earlier. That's the answer.
I guess. I don't know. See, to me, I've always, to this day, like Wonder Woman, the first one, is my favorite comic book movie. It doesn't have Batman in it. Well, technically Bruce is mentioned, but it still surprises me to this day. Like the amount of love I have for that first movie, it still to this day bugs me that Steve just flies through the force field, like just flies through it, and yet they haven't seen anyone ever. People have had boats, and guys in boats just fly straight through it, sail straight through it. Like, aren't they meant to be hidden? Is it meant to be a force field? Like, how can people just easily get to it? And this has never happened before. People have been traveling, for years at this point. They never explain how that happens, and I don't really care. I just sort of have the same mentality for this. It's like, yeah, it doesn't really make a lot of sense, but I really enjoy the end result.
All right. Well, as long as I'm on my nitpicks, there's another one that comes later in the movie. And it's the same sort of thing, like narrative shortcut to get us to where we need to go. I get why you did it. I just think there was a better way to do it. And that is when Maxwell Lord is like, I gotta touch more people. I gotta find a way to touch more people all at once. Great. Got it. Cool. And then he goes.
It's a good thing that those poster boards about this satellite system.
Yeah,
exactly.
In the Oval Office.
Exactly. So he goes to the president, and cool. Like, again, using wishes to get in with the president, to then use the president for wishes. All that is fine. It all is consistent. But yeah, then he turns around, and there's just all these posters with this magical satellite that does exactly what he needs it to do. Like, come on. Like, you have it written in the story that you can manipulate people into wishing for what you need. So why couldn't he have used that, like go into the president and go, don't you wish I could touch more people all at once? And the president goes, oh yeah, and then use that device as a way to get there instead of the convenient poster boards of the satellite system. It's just a little too convenient.
Yeah, I'll give you that one. Like, yeah, it definitely is. And I also kind of thought it's like almost like it's a reverse box from Batman Forever. It's sort of, it's instead of pulling it in, it's pushing it out.
Yeah. So that was another one. Those are kind of my three biggies. And again, on first viewing, the rules of the wishes, I was a little like, and then again, it works better the second time around. The other thing, and again, it's just a little clumsy. I just feel like there was a better way. Is that random guy that pops up to spout some exposition and then you never see or hear from him again?
Yeah, that was a bit odd.
It's just like, yeah, I found this guy. He claims to be a shaman, and he pulls out a book. He tells them exactly what they need to know, and then it's like, all right, thanks, bye. It's just, I don't know the answer, but I just feel like there was a better way.
The discussion that they have there is good, and like it's acted really well. Like when Barbara kind of figures out that shit, they're talking about killing this guy, and And then, Diana realizing, oh, I can't do, and Steve being the one that's going, look, there might not be another way. Like, that's the three characterizations there are all really good, and I thought that was well acted. But it is an odd scene to sort of think that, they're flying, they're in Cairo, and we're like, okay, we'll meet you at this record store or behind the record store, or whatever it is. It's just kind of like, they're two very different destinations.
Yeah.
I mean, they're on a quest. There's so many superhero movies that have that, and it's almost never my favorite part of the film. If you recall, one of my big gripes about Aquaman is I thought that desert quest was just unnecessary, and we didn't need to go on it or be there or anything. I wasn't on board with that part of the film. And you can kind of say that that's this part in this film, but at the same time, I like the conversation that's had, and I don't know why, but it just works for me that this guy is like a Mayan descendant, and he has these texts that he's inherited that were, old, ancient, whatever. And he says, my people, it's convenient. It's exposition, whatever, that, this is how they figure out what needs to be done. But I also like the fact that, there's documentation that, this happened, this is the way that it needed to be fixed. But all I can tell you is that this thing showed up, and within months, my entire civilization was wiped out. Mm-hmm. I don't know why that conversation, I'm not quoting it verbatim. It just worked for me. It registers logic with me, and I kind of like that, the vanishing of the Mayan people, the fall of the Roman Empire, all these things that there may not be a clear, known explanation for. They're saying, hey, this thing was responsible in this moment. Mm-hmm. Is it 100% logical? No, probably not. And if you're a historian, you're probably sitting there telling me all the reasons why these things happened or why the Roman Empire fell, the Mayans disappeared, and all that stuff. But I'm not a historian. I'm just a geek that likes comic book movies. So for me, this explanation works, and it was effective enough.
Yeah, I think I like you guys said, I like the conversation, especially the 3 points of view and kind of the problem at hand. I just didn't think you need the fourth. I think if the three of them had found this book on their own, and as they're reading into the history, Barbara starts going, oh no, if you guys go down this road, I'm going to lose everything I've gained. And Diana's like, now I'm going to lose Steve again. And Steve's like, there might not be a choice. Like, you just don't need that fourth guy. But I loved Barbara's. I loved that turning point for Barbara, of her being like, no, like, sorry, my wish has only been good for me, and her really making that decision at that point. Another scene that I thought was pretty amazing is when she lets loose on that dude in the street when she's all in the black. I think
you see this look on my face. This is my I don't give a damn what happens to this guy look, because that guy got everything he deserved and maybe not quite enough.
It was very interesting how there were scenes with Diana when she goes to the gala earlier on, and then later when Barbara comes into her own and she's a little she's a little more popular with the guys, where how. And it's certainly intentional how these women like can't go anywhere without men bothering them, which, we all know is true. And we hear it from our wives or our spouses or our sisters or our friends of like how this is just a thing. I thought it was a brave choice to kind of highlight that here. Is she was mad she didn't get that attention. And then when she got that attention, she realized it was a blessing and a curse. And then that moment where she snaps on that guy, and she just keeps saying no and just beats the living hell out of him. I thought that was like really well acted, really well directed. It was effective.
I agree. And in 1984, it would have been that bad. I mean, people can say what they want about it being exaggerated or anything else. By today's standards, yes, it would be, because the consciousness of the general public is far more aware. And I feel like there's a shift trying to be better about that sort of thing. But in 1984, that shit wasn't around, y'all. Mm-hmm. This is how things would have happened. Mm-hmm. Like it or not, that's a sad part of history, not just in America, but other places where women were objectified in that fashion, and probably much worse than what was shown in this film.
Yeah.
That scene where Diana saves her when he's harassing her originally, that kind of gave me sort of Shazam vibes as well, from the scene where, like, he saves the woman in the park and sort of just, punches the guy and he goes flying and stuff like that. It's different, different take, but a very sort of similar scene.
It's funny you say that, because what went through my mind during that scene was the alley mugging scene in Superman 1.
Oh, yeah.
Because he's using his powers to stop the assault from happening, or the mugging, and nobody else but him realizes exactly what happened. You know what I'm saying? Like, kind of on the down low with the powers sort of thing.
Mm. Oh, you just use their what does she say? Like their momentum, and it's easy, and I can show you, and like that. I thought that was funny.
Yeah.
There's, to me, a lot of parallels. I mean, you keep referencing, because I reference Superman the movie. There's just a lot of nods. I mean, even at the end when people start renouncing their wishes and things are kind of like reversing through time. That's almost, it's not quite to the level, but kind of spinning the earth backwards sort of thing.
Well, so what was interesting is, because that was something I really wanted to pay attention on my second viewing, is I was like, does it reverse time? It doesn't. But what it does is,
some of it does. Not all
time.
of it is fixed in that way, but some of it does.
But what it does is it eliminates the repercussions, but they don't go back in time.
Well,
the missiles disappear and all of that.
See, the stuff going back into the smokestacks and the wall being undone in Egypt and stuff like that. It's not the same thing, but it's along that line.
Yeah, it's like the effects are eliminated, but the time, they don't go back 2 weeks and start over.
Right.
Because the city's still trashed. When Max is talking to his son and everything.
Exactly. That's how you know that time hasn't reversed, but the effects of the wishes have. So something you were just saying, Jamie, that reminded me. I didn't want to forget to say this. Is this also, I think, is somewhat consistent with some of the movies we mentioned in the second installment of a superhero series. It reminds me a lot of Superman 2 and of Spider-Man 2, where both of those movies one of the central story points is that our hero essentially gives up their powers for something they want even more. So Superman 2, he gives up his powers to be with Lois. Spider-Man 2, he gives up his powers so he can live a normal life, which includes Mary Jane. And here, Diana is essentially giving up her powers in order to keep Steve around. But what I liked is that it was a different spin on it, because for Diana, it wasn't conscious. She didn't know she didn't know the deal she was making. And so I thought they did that very well.
She didn't know she was making a deal.
Yeah. I thought they did that very well, and that she was holding it. She goes, oh, I know what I would wish for. And that was enough. But then once she realized the price she was paying, she still wasn't really... it took her a while to be ready to give it back. But anyway, I thought it was a neat spin on something we had seen before, where I feel like it was an intentional homage, like in that, sometimes even our heroes want what they want. And even Diana has a really great scene in here where she goes, I never ask for anything. I don't want anything. I'm happy to help other people. Why can't I just have this one thing? Why can't I just keep you? Why can't something be for me? And I was like, totally fair.
Fair call.
Yeah. And so I don't know. I thought that was a really cool thing too.
I agree. And again, it's not holding the audience's hand in a lot of respects, at least as far as I can see. When I watched the movie the first time last week, I didn't understand why she couldn't get that lock off that garage door.
Oh, that's when I twigged. It's like, oh, that's what she's given up is, yeah.
Yeah.
See, that didn't hit me at first. And in fact, it didn't hit me at all that, they had the Raiders of the Lost Ark sequence in that convoy in the desert, which I think is also a great highlight of the film.
Thank you.
Some of it's
awesome.
Far-fetched and cheesy and
it's
whatever
so
else.
good.
I don't give a damn.
It's a great action
scene. Is it impossible
Come on.
for the logistics and the timing and everything else for her to take that lariat and knock that bullet or wrap that bullet up and get it from hitting Steve and riding on that rocket ship, or not rocket ship, the rocket that he fires to save those kids while swinging? Does all of that make a lot of sense realistically? Hell no, but it sure was fun to watch.
Dude, the same person who tweeted me claiming that the movie was racist also claimed that one of its faults was that she lassoed an RPG. I'm like, but they explain why she had to. Like, she's losing her powers and she had to fly over there really quickly.
Wait, this
How
person's
is it-
problem is her lassoing onto an RPG, but
Yes.
doing it with a cloud, an airplane that's a half a mile away, or a lightning bolt. That's cool. All right,
Dude,
dude, cool.
I don't
Let's
know.
go. Anyway,
This is what I mean. Like the stupid criticisms being slung at this movie is just ridiculous.
I mean,
But no,
we'll-
that chase
we'll-
scene was awesome.
let me step back to my point, and then we'll come back to this convoy scene here. As I watched it the second time, I mean, it became clear later on when she was getting injured and all this other stuff, and then I think it's Steve that actually mentions that you're losing your powers here. I think it's
Yeah.
him that tells her that. That was the moment the light bulb triggered for me. None of it ever registered in real time as it was happening, and then watching it the second time, I'm like, okay, here the lock is where they start showing you the progress of it. And, again, Patty wasn't holding my hand there, and that's my fault for not being quick enough to catch it the first go round. But watching it the second time, I'm like, oh, it's kind of like watching The Sixth Sense. There are so many damn hints to the ending of The Sixth Sense and The Sixth Sense that I watch it now and I'm like, I can't believe I didn't pick up on this until he told me at the end that that's what happened. So anyway, the convoy scene, her coming up underneath that truck and pulling down the drive axle that catapults her up into the sky, all of that, very Raiders of the Lost Ark homage, which is cool because I love that movie as much as anybody, but I thought that sequence was fantastic.
Yeah,
Now,
I agree with you. I think
if you want to make
yeah.
logic leaps here, I get it because she doesn't have enough strength to hold on to the lasso as she's just saved these two children from being in the middle of the street, but she was just literally pushing a truck sideways down the highway at 50 miles an hour. I mean,
well, yeah, but she's also been shot, and she's also like exhausted because she's losing her powers from everything that she did just do.
and that's ultimately how I can make peace with it. But I mean, some of that's convenient, but I don't care because I was entertained. And I don't think that this hardcore violates any hard set rule that was established. So, I mean, I'm okay with this.
Yeah, I thought the chase sequence was amazing. And again, for me, I thought Patty Jenkins has only gotten more confident in action. I've seen some complaints there's not enough action. And I'm like, really? Like, I was very happy with the amount of Wonder Woman I got in this Wonder Woman movie. I thought that was terrific. There is certainly a gap between like the mall action scene and then this. There is a gap there, and I think that that's fair, but I also was never bored, and also like, hey, sometimes you need to tell the story. So
Right. I mean, she's a storyteller, not
yeah,
an action entertainer per se.
But you get, I mean, the opening Themyscira scene is an incredible action sequence, and then it goes almost directly into the 1980s action montage. Then you get the extended chase sequence that we were just talking about that I thought was really impressive. Then you
the
get
White House
Then you get the
sequence.
White House fight, which was
the cheetah fight.
terrific. Then you get the learning to fly, and then you get the big finale, the cheetah fight. Like I was very satisfied with the amount and the quality of the action throughout the film. I thought it was terrific.
I don't disagree at
And
all.
in the White House fight, while Barbara, number one, I love the moment where Diana is like
Saving everybody instead of actually fighting Cheetah.
well, first she's like taking out these guys in the safest way she can, and then as Cheetah is attacking them, she's saving them behind her, which I thought was such a cool thing too. Like I think we could have even had a little more of it, but it was just such a great moment where like Cheetah's going after these guys and Diana's only focused on saving them.
Yes. I love that perspective because, and I'm not saying that that's the first movie to ever do something like that, but to me it just felt fresh in that respect.
Yeah.
That it wasn't just another action sequence for the sake of, but doing it just differently enough that it is like, oh yeah, I really like that she not only has to worry about stopping Barbara, but also making sure that these guys who by no fault of their own are in danger.
Mm-hmm.
She does it in the convoy scene as well.
Yeah.
When she rips the steering wheel off the top,
yeah,
she's
the
like,
brakes
the brakes
still
still work.
Brakes still work, yeah. And when so she's getting weaker as the movie goes on. But again, what I love is they didn't go full on Spider-Man 2 or Superman 2 where she just loses her powers like overnight. And so then we have a gap where it's like, oh, they're not even the superhero. Whereas like, no, we can still have Wonder Woman action. She's just more vulnerable as we do it. But as she's getting weaker, then the White House fight happens, which again I thought was terrific. Like I love that sequence. And Barbara shows up, and then Diana, she finally pulls out the big guns where she does the shockwave with her bracelets, and because she's so weakened, like Barbara just spins right through it and it doesn't even slow her down. Like I thought that was great because usually you're like, come on Diana, do the thing, you can do the thing, and she tries and it's still not enough.
Well, I mean, that moment was actually in one of the trailers, at least one of them, if not a couple of them.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, Cheetah's strong enough to resist the Wonder Woman gauntlet blast thing. That's interesting. I didn't realize her power level was that high. Mm-hmm. But obviously, given the explanation of Diana's weakened state, makes a lot more sense than just Cheetah being tough enough to get through that.
Yeah. And something else I wanted to mention is, Hans Zimmer's score and the moments he brings in the Wonder Woman theme, like right as the chase kicks off and she jumps out of the Jeep and starts running after them, and you hear that theme kick in, and then at the end when she shows up in the golden armor and it kicks in again. There are some murmurs of it earlier on in the film, but those are the two where it like really kicks in. Same thing where I'm just like, oh yeah, man, hell yeah, Wonder Woman.
I do love that thing where the convoy thing kicks off and they're driving that shitty Peugeot, and like Barbara's like, I've got this, and she just kind of like steps out of the car and starts running past it. Visually, I just thought that part of that sequence looked fantastic.
Got into
and
her,
really
her
any of her running at the
quickly.
high speed, like she wasn't quite Flash levels, but obviously running at a very heightened speed. I just thought that all looked really good.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the kind of thing that can look really cheesy depending on how it's shown, and I thought it was masterfully done in this film.
Yeah.
One thing I did quickly want to mention, I'm not going to dwell on it, don't even want to get into the specifics, don't want to get political, but there were some very obvious character decisions and traits with Maxwell Lord. Yeah.
So
if you know what I mean.
Real quick, I'm sorry, I don't want to cut you off, but real quick, because I don't want to forget it again. One of the highlights for me of the convoy scene, and Pascal's great throughout the film as far as his performance. His character choices maybe I think could have stood some adjusting here and there, which we can come back to that later or not, whatever. But his facial expressions while that convoy scene is going on are hysterical.
They're good.
If you get a moment, watch it again and just watch his facial expressions as the stuff around him is going on. It's fantastic. Sorry, Brennan.
No,
But yeah, I mean, the things like, I'm a TV personality, positive thinking, a wall happens to appear. Like, there's some stuff there it's not even that subtle, but it's definitely there.
You can say that if you want,
Yeah.
but ultimately Max Lord came around in the end versus the that you're referencing still hasn't.
No, but that's what I'm saying. Like, but yeah, I think maybe that could be a part of the reason for setting in the 80s is that greed element and just, this loser wanting power. Like that to me seemed very deliberate.
Oh, that's 100% why it's set in the 80s. I will say, I understand your point. Before we saw the movie and we saw the trailers and we saw Maxwell Lord with the blonde hair, I did worry that it was going to be too much of a caricature of that person, and
they walked the line. Yeah.
I'm glad they didn't go too heavy into that because sure, it's there's some shades of it, absolutely, but like I don't we all know, we don't need a whole movie to be about that. We all know how we feel about that. So I was actually relieved that that's not where they went. That sure, you can see it that way. The fact that he's a con man, you can see things like that, but they didn't lean too heavy into it, and I was grateful because for me, I'd want to watch the movie. I don't.
They did just enough.
Yeah, but I have seen a little bit of why set in the 80s, if you're not going to use more 80s music. And I'm really listen, they made the choice they did. And I actually thought they did a nice job of setting it in the 80s.
It was restrained. It wasn't a caricature of the time period.
Well,
it was
the choice to set it in the 80s makes perfect sense. Again, thematically with what they're trying to say, because the 80s was the age of greed is good, more is better, always more.
Life is good, but it could be better.
Yeah, yourself above others. Look out for yourself. It was excess. It was get as much as you can. There are no consequences. That's exactly what the movie's about. That's what Maxwell Lord is about, and that's what he's offering everyone he meets along the way. So using the 80s to reflect that mindset, and then using Wonder Woman to kind of go, well, wait, there are prices for that you don't think about. There are prices you pay, and there is a better way. All made perfect sense to me. But I also think that Patty Jenkins was very smart in not just making it a 2-hour 80s nostalgia fest, because at a certain point, you're watching a movie, you want to get invested in the story and the characters. You don't just want a parade of famous 80s icons or famous 80s songs where you go, I remember that, I know that. I think that she towed the line, and I think she did it really well. I think that she smartly really gets it over with in that opening montage, that 80s montage, which as I was watching it, I was like, oh wow, that's where it's really leaning into kind of the 80s stereotype or cliche, if you will. And that montage is where it is a little silly. It is a little campy. And when she saves that bride from falling off the balcony, I did have some of the, I hate to say it, but Superman 3 vibes, not even Superman 2, but Superman 3, where I went, oh, is this what this movie's going to be? Is it all going to be like this? And so when I hear people talking about the tonal inconsistencies, for me, I really think it's just that sequence. It's that very 80s, a little bit sillier sequence at the very beginning, because for me, the rest of the movie I find to be very consistent tonally. I just think that one is where they had a little more fun with it and did a little more of kind of the fun 80s nostalgia, because for the rest of the movie, it's still set in the 80s. It's still that thing, but then it's more about the story being told.
I agree. And even the musical cues during that sequence are very tongue-in-cheek, of kind of nudging you and say, hey, remember the 80s and, the cheesiness, and the bad guys at the mall that, are getting ready to rob the back room of the jewelry store, very much like A-Team villains from 1984. They're
very cheesy and over
they're
the
silly.
top.
Yeah.
But that's all purposely done. But I agree with you that it didn't go overboard, because all due respect, I didn't need a 2.5-hour Wonder Woman Goldbergs movie.
Right, exactly. I love the Goldbergs for what it is, but yeah, that is in 22-minute chunks. This movie, it can't just be that. It can't just be a nostalgia trip. It needs to be a movie. So I agree. I love that we got a little bit of that at the beginning in the arcade and the mall, and all that was really fun, but then the movie kind of settles into itself. But also, if you...
I watched an entire thread on the internet, and I should have stopped after about 4 comments.
Can I just quickly
criticizing the film because some of the video games in the arcade weren't invented in 1984.
Oh, geez.
I saw that about a car too, which I'm surprised you didn't pick up on. But with the whole 80s nostalgia thing, in a post Stranger Things world where they do it so well, it's going to be hard to sort of do this kind of thing without looking like a carbon copy, or if and potentially not pulling it off as well as they do. So I'm with you, Andy. To me, it made sense that I got why it was set in the 80s. It didn't bother me. There weren't 80s needle drops. I mean, there was one
in the party, which I thought
goes to Hollywood
was very well done. Yeah,
Welcome to the Pleasure Dome or something and that worked.
And it's not even like an 80s anthem that everybody recognized.
That's the thing.
Truthfully, I had to pull out my phone and use Shazam on it to even figure out what it was.
It didn't take you out of the movie, but you knew it was an 80s song. It totally was. But I don't know. I just think for the movie that it didn't necessarily need that. And there are things like the Goldbergs. But for me, which I love that show too. But I mean, I went to Stranger Things and I was just like, if you want that, these things exist. This is a stylistic choice. They've chosen not to do that. Maybe because things like Stranger Things exist where they do it so well. Why try and just do what they're doing? We're setting ours in the 80s, but we're going to do something different.
Yeah. Yeah. And real quick, like, again, during that 80s, call it the 80s montage at the beginning, which I really did like, and it was just the shot with the bride that worried me, and then the rest of it I was fine with. I really love the mall fight. I think the mall fight's awesome.
Mind you, the kid shoplifters just got
why
away.
he liked that? Because they were swinging.
Because she swings. Oh my God, it's so much swinging. But during that sequence, again, there are a lot of moments in that are setting up the themes of the movie where, it shows the two douchebags in the really expensive car racing around. It was about the 80s, excess, and seeing all of these people trying to get more, trying to do more, while you're hearing Maxwell Lord talking about how life can only be better, to the point where even in the mall, you see like the people just kind of like pigging out, like eating so much food that it's obviously unhealthy, but it's all about the excess of the 80s. And I thought that was
my
really
favorite sequence in the film behind the Linda Carter cameos, that cheeseburger.
Yeah. And there's even like a guy who's got like a huge plate of nachos as he walks into the arcade, and I'm like, yeah, hell yeah, maybe I need to watch it again to learn the lesson, but
he looked like the kid from Man of Steel. I'm still not convinced it's not the same actor.
Oh, okay.
The redhead bully kid.
Pete?
Yeah, he looked just like Pete.
Yeah, but I appreciated that even in that sequence where it's like, oh, we're in the 80s, at the same time, they're still going, they're making that point early on of, more is better, it's all about me, more money, more food, more clothes, more sunglasses, the little girl stealing sunglasses, like more of everything is always the answer, because then the rest of the movie, in the end, it's about going, what you wish for just for you affects everyone around you, and sometimes you have to choose everyone around you instead of what you think you want.
As someone who vaguely recalls watching Linda Carter throw her tiara periodically on that show back in the day, I appreciated how much she threw the tiara in this movie.
Hell yeah. I thought that was awesome.
And that brings me to another point where people are talking about inconsistencies with this and the rest of the DCEU continuity is, how did nobody know that she was out there doing this stuff? And it's like they established that she's taking out cameras when she goes into these events. The news says that, some female, somebody or other is out here doing these things. Nobody can really figure out who it is. We can't find a story that matches it. And she's, anybody that she does save, she's kind of given the whole, this is our secret, keep it on the down low sort of thing. This is, to me, all establishes consistency with her having the conversation of 100 years ago, I stepped away from the world of man. It's like she was out of sight. She didn't want to be known. Like, she was very brazen and like out in your face in the World War I thing in the first movie. Well, obviously the documentation is different back then than what it is in modern days with cameras and cell phones and everything else. But I don't find where any of this is contradictory to that statement.
No.
Obviously it is a retcon where in that movie she's saying, I just, left y'all alone for 100 years, versus the way Patty's presenting it now, she's saying Wonder Woman was there, but kind of working from the shadows sort of a thing. And I think it's well done. And people are saying, well, people would remember seeing her on the street, or some camera would have caught her. And it's like, yes, but is there enough there to really put together anything versus some guy that's running a conspiracy theorist newspaper in the corner office of some hole in the wall?
Yeah. Well, and they were really smart about like really leaning into like the early days of Batman, like the urban legend aspect of like, reports of some mysterious woman helping them out, but like nothing past that. I do think they missed an opportunity though from that of going, some Wonder Woman saved, just the little name drop. I think they missed the opportunity.
Yeah, they've still never called her that in either of the movies.
But
you're right. Like I think, yes, is it a retcon? Absolutely. But is it a clever retcon in that it still works with what you've seen? I agree with you. I think so. Cause she makes sure that there's no documents. There's no documentation of her. She takes out the cameras first. She does it all from the shadows. But I also think there's more to it where she says, 100 years ago, I stepped away from humanity. So even though she is helping people, the whole beginning of the movie shows that she's still helping people, but she's also living a solitary life. She has no one else in her life. So she also stepped away from humanity in that way, is that once her crew from World War I passed on, she didn't find new people because she couldn't let go of the past. She couldn't let go of Steve. And so she's helping, but she stepped away socially and emotionally from the people around her. So it still works.
Yep.
Right.
I agree.
And another thing with this inconsistency conversation, it was one main thread in this group that I read, and it wasn't one of our groups. It was a different one. People are talking about, excuse me, how does Batman not remember any of this stuff happening? Number one, who says he didn't? Number two, Batman as presented in Justice League is roughly my age. I'm 45 years old. In 1984, I was 9 years old. So Batman and I are a couple years apart. So let's say Batman's somewhere between 8 and 12 years old. How many of you remember a major event that happened on the planet Earth when you were 8 to 12 years old that you can remember every single stinking detail about?
Mm-hmm.
I can speak from my perspective. I remember the Challenger disaster.
Yep.
I can't remember anything except for the image of that thing blowing up on television. And the kids in my class and kids on TV were like cheering when that happened because they thought it was part of the launch. And me thinking to myself, something's wrong. This is not what this is supposed to look like. And then the rest of it blew up and it kind of went on from there. But I don't remember anything after that. I can't place the details of that. So yes, I know he's Batman. Yes, I know he's the smartest guy in the room in any room he's in. But if he's a kid like that, even if he's aware of these things that are going on, does he truly have an understanding of it?
But I mean, at the same time, too, a bank robbery that happens in some weird circumstance occurs where the robbers get caught and they're not sure why. That's not going to be national news.
Exactly.
No,
Yeah.
I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking like, walls appearing and disappearing in Egypt, or nuclear missiles being launched and then just vanishing into thin air and nobody knowing what happened. And, maybe he spent a little bit of time early in his career trying to figure this out and never could come to a solid conclusion. So he just kind of put it in the unsolved files and went about the business of kicking clown.
Well, and I do think that is something that, and that's why I was really paying attention the second time of like, did they go back in time or whatever? And so it is unclear if everyone has a memory of these things, of the missiles and the wall. Like that's completely left up in the air. They don't say yes or no. So yeah, I have no idea. So I get that point.
I think they do, but I also think that at some point this just no longer is relevant in public zeitgeist.
Right. But I mean,
even the September 11th attacks, and I don't want to, go way down this rabbit hole, but I remember vividly every detail of September 11th, 2001. From the moment that I first saw, I was at a car wash. I was getting my truck washed, and I heard the news because somebody was watching it on TV. I was trying to hand her a $20 bill for getting my truck washed, and she wouldn't take it because she was glued to this television. And I'm like, what happened? She said, somebody bombed the World Trade Center. I was like, well, we're kicking somebody's ass by the end of the day. And she handed me back my change. I got my truck. I went to work, and I watched literally every other event fold live on television in the customer lounge at work that day. I remember every single detail of that. And for weeks after, the entire country was very aware, very focused, very, very tense, very everything.
The whole world.
In years that passed, the memories are still there, and it's still a very real thing that happened to this country and this world, but it's different today than it was 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very much how I see these events unfolding in people's minds here. For a year or two after, people are probably still at coffee shops discussing what happened. What do you think happened? I don't understand what this was. But eventually it just became a memory and not a focal point. Am I making sense with what I'm saying here?
Sure.
Yeah, I get it.
So that's kind of how I see it. I don't think anybody's memory was lost of what occurred in these moments. I just think focus shifted after time passed, I guess is where I'm at with it.
No, absolutely.
Maybe I'm reaching too much to try and come to a logical conclusion. I don't know.
I don't think you're reaching too much. I think the people who are using that as a complaint are reaching too much, because a lot of things changed after the wishes got renounced, and we don't know what those repercussions are, so don't worry about it.
I don't know, even with the taking out the video cameras and stuff, that kind of got mentioned on the Real Fans thread earlier today, and even Connell was just like, oh, but because I said about her taking out the video cameras, that shows that there's still no evidence, and Connell was like, oh, but the videos that record that stuff before she took out the cameras, yeah, okay, cool, but at the same time I'm just kind of like, don't overthink it. Like, they did enough to show me that there's no video footage. Just that simple thing of her taking out the cameras.
Exactly.
I took it for what it is, and that's enough for me. Like, I don't.
You're going to reach whatever conclusion your mind wants you to reach in this matter by whatever logic wants you to dictate. If you want to say, yes, she definitely got caught on camera, you can make the logical argument for that. If you don't, then you can't. For me, I'm going to say she was already moving at very fast speeds to the point where people weren't really catching her more than maybe a glimpse out of the corner of their eye. Video camera technology in 1984 wasn't exactly what you'd call 4K high definition HDR kind of stuff. So if she's already moving at that speed to the exterior cameras, they're not going to catch her. Once she's inside, if she has an idea where she's kind of like hiding in the corner or what have you, and knows the position of the cameras around and what she wants to do, she can use the tiara, take those cameras out, and then come out into the open. So
which is what she does.
Draw a logical conclusion of why she wasn't captured as opposed to was, because that's what my mind wants me to say. Again, maybe I'm reaching, maybe the people that are complaining are reaching. I don't know. It's a superhero movie, and I'm entertained, and I want to enjoy it. I don't want to sit around all day and find reasons to complain. This isn't Infinity War. I don't want to have a 2.5-hour conversation where I want to find every single fault. Because I did do that once, and I caught a lot of hell for it. But now everybody else is on the polar opposite side of this fence, and I understand why people gave me shit for that, because it's just annoying.
Well, and it's one of those things where, like, if the movie makes it a point to go, hey, we thought about this, here's the answer, then that's the answer, right?
Yeah,
like
that's exactly right. You articulated it perfectly again.
Yeah, so stop going, yeah, but your answer's not good enough. I want another answer. Well, it's like, no, they thought about it. They knew you were going to ask the question. They answered it. Move on. Like, when I have issues like that, and I have, I'm a movie geek. I do pick up on some stuff like that. Not these that we're talking about, but, for me, like, guess what? You didn't answer why Diana has access to a bunch of fueled up fighter jets. You didn't answer that. So I'm going to call you on that. But you can't say, how come people don't have footage of Diana? Well, they made it a point to show that as soon as she showed up, she took out the cameras. It was the first thing she did.
And I mean, if you really want to go a deep dive with it, is the reason that she wanted that picture back so badly in BVS because it was a sentimental thing that she really wanted to have to remember Steve and Charlie and the Chief and all those other guys? Is that really why she wanted that picture back? Or is it because she knew that was literally the only piece of photographic evidence out there that proved that she existed?
I think it's a bit of both.
Yeah, I think it works both ways.
But yeah, like with the answer thing, I mean, I was thinking the other day about it, and it reminded me of Batman Begins. Like, I adore that movie. It's my favorite Batman movie, but I walked out of there in 2005 going, how does someone not realize that the tumblers from Wayne Enterprises, like, it's, and then, they answer it in the next movie, and it's like, okay, cool. They thought about it. They gave me the answer, and I'm happy.
Yeah.
It's the same sort of thing here. Like, you just don't overthink it. Like, they've acknowledged it. They've given a response, and move on.
Yeah.
It's not that big a deal.
Well, it's like in the first Avengers movie, sorry, going to the other side, but where, they pull up the picture of Jane Foster, and they're like, We went and got Jane. She's safe. Don't worry about it. So that way, guess what? They thought about it. They acknowledged it. Let's move on. We don't have to worry about where's Jane? Is Jane okay? Why isn't she in this movie? She's safe. Move on. All you have to do is tell me you thought about it. All you have to do is tell me, but if I ask the question, make sure that there's logic in the answer.
Speaking of that, it's probably a segue, but are we going to talk about Steve? We kind of have to.
Yeah. Well, we might as well get that tackled. I'll kick it off. It's cool. This is my biggest problem with this film. It was from the moment that it happened and his reveal in the film and everything else. I'm not sure, and I'd love to have a conversation with Jenkins, Johns, whoever else was involved with coming up with this particular idea, why they felt necessary to have Steve put into, like, the whole Patrick Swayze ghost thing where he had to be in somebody else's body inhabiting them instead of just being back.
I feel that it kind of overcomplicated it.
I do too. because you have this wish that is literally a fantasy thing in a comic book world that can produce walls out of dust in the ground. Just put them up, and you can't just bring Steve Trevor back. You have to have him inhabit somebody else's body, and then have the entire conversations of, is this unwanted sexual assault that Wonder Woman just did on this guy?
Christ.
Which
Welcome
I think
to
is a bit of a
2020.
deep risk, but at the same time, people who are saying that, they ain't wrong, in my opinion. So I don't care for this choice. I'm not sure why it was made. It's probably my least favorite thing about the film, but gentlemen, please discuss.
I'm kind of with you. I am with you. When I first happened, I'm like, oh, really? And then I wasn't sure if the guy turned into him, but then I realized it was, no, that's just who Diana can see. If Steve had have been some, real, memorialized, like he was this massive war hero that generations had talked about, and what he did to sacrifice, to save essentially the planet in World War One. I can understand it. The fact that, okay, he can't walk around looking like Steve Trevor because they know who Steve Trevor is. But he's a guy who died at that point, 60, 70 something years ago? Like, just make him be back. Like, I don't know. Like, it was a weird choice. I know that maybe the logic of, but how does he? I mean, but again, to answer it, I guess, Jamie, your thing is, like the walls can materialize, nukes can come out of nowhere, they can vanish just as quickly. Like, just make him be Steve. That's
just it. I want to give the film and the storytellers the benefit of the doubt in that they had a legitimate, logical reason for why they did it. I just can't figure out what that is. That's why I'd love to be a fly on the wall or have a discussion with them. Why was this choice made? Because to me, I don't like it, and it didn't make sense.
And even the end scene where it's Christmas, like how she encounters him and stuff, there's that moment I thought, are they going to start to become romantically involved? Is this going to be her moving on? But she doesn't do that either.
And, he's wearing the outfit, and he's like, for some reason, that sequence, I kind of liked it, but at the same time, it doesn't help me get over these issues that I'm telling you I have with this choice.
And that, I'll just say for the record, from my opinion, that one scene doesn't make it a Christmas movie, but...
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. You're not taking that away from me. Yes, it most certainly does.
I'm going to watch it at 4th of July before I watch it at Christmas.
That's what I was thinking.
I actually wish they'd have just leaned harder into the 4th of July, and I could have watched it along with the Captain America movies and Independence Day, but they had to throw in the Christmas scene just to mess it all up.
On Kevin Smith's podcast, he was saying he was of the opinion that when they realized it was going to be pushed back, that they tacked that on. I'm like, no, you got to remember, this movie was originally meant to come out around Christmas time 2019.
November, yeah.
Like, that's why that scene's there.
Which I appreciate. I do like that scene. So
yeah, I like it, but just the fact that old mate shows up and there's no real, like, she acknowledges him, but I thought there might be I'm Diana, what's your name? Like, there's just nothing. I don't know.
Okay.
There's not a lot of logic to it, but here's the thing. Excuse me. You could have had Steve materialize out of thin air, told that whole story. She gives him up just the same, changes nothing. Changes no dynamic of anything there except for the questions in the back of my mind of what about this poor bastard who's Steve's inhabiting his body right now, who's unwillingly doing all of this stuff sexually and in danger and everything else. She has him in this outfit Steve says he hates and can't stand and would never wear. But then at the end of the movie, she's walking down the street, she gets hit with a snowball by some kids, and just happens to run into a guy who might just look a little bit like Steve, like maybe the hair, and he's wearing that outfit, and it just kind of gives her the smile, and they can have that same discussion, and nothing about the film changes. But why was the choice made to have Steve inhabit instead of materialize? That's the part I cannot get over. You didn't have to change anything else that happened in the film, dialogue or anything. Well, I mean, you would have had to change a bit of dialogue. But you see what I'm saying? I don't get it.
Andy?
Okay. As
This
far
is going to be good. Hang on, let me adjust here. This sounds like it's going to be good.
Jesus. So as far as Steve having to come back in someone else's body, I didn't really question it when I watched it. I've only questioned it now that it's become a thing that people have wanted to argue about. So at the because most of the magical things that happen in the movie, they still have to have some sort of device to happen. So like when Maxwell goes, something will take you out of my way or something, and then the IRS shows up. So it still has to be some sort
Simon
of
Stagg,
real...
by the way, just a quick shout out to that. Nice little DC Easter egg there.
What was that?
Simon Stagg. So it was a little DC Easter egg.
Should I know Simon Stagg? Do I have to turn in my card?
He's the guy responsible, was it for the Elemental Man?
Oh. Okay, I don't know.
He was
that.
like a
I don't know.
character in Supergirl and the comics. Like, even I was aware of that name drop. I'm like, oh, because when he kept calling him Simon, I'm like, why is he saying Simon like we should know who it is? And then the next scene that he's in, he's at Stagg Industries, and I'm like, oh, Simon Stagg.
Oh, okay.
That went over my head, dude.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Shit.
Anyway, so there are moments where, even when Maxwell Lord makes wishes, like something in the real world has to happen to make it happen. But then you're right, there are other things like the missiles just disappearing at the end where you go, okay, well, maybe things can just magically happen. So I think your point is valid. I just kind of accepted it the first time of like, oh, well, he can't just materialize out of nothing. So this is essentially the device they need to use to bring him back. It's sort of a quantum leap thing. And I didn't even think, well, what happened to the real guy? Where's he? Because it's like quantum leap. He was in the waiting room, he's just, and he's going to get his mind wiped when he gets back. So like, I didn't think twice about it. But now that, you guys have discussed it and I'm like, yeah, like honestly, the cleaner, simpler way he just did come back. He just materialized. Who cares where he came from? Who cares, where, he's just in his own body or whatever. So I agree with that. Is like, did you have to overcomplicate it by making him inhabit someone else's body? Probably not. There was a cleaner way to do it. I really loved the conversation between Steve and Diana where they're walking in front of like the monuments and he goes, I don't remember where I was, but I knew I was somewhere. I know that it was good. I just liked that little nod to like the afterlife without going too far down that road of just being like, no, I'm okay. But I can't remember.
Well done.
Yeah, I like that.
I loved in that scene how Diana won't let him go. Like just the way she's holding him when they're walking. Even Jess pointed it out. She's just like, if I've been away on tour for, 5 weeks, whatever, she's like, that's what I'm like with you. She's like, when you get someone back, you don't want to let them go. And I hadn't noticed that the first time I watched it. And when Jess pointed it out, I was like, that's actually really cool. Like, yeah, if you watch them walking through that monument and stuff, like just the way she's holding his hand and like she's so invested in just, she does not want to let him go ever.
Yeah. As for the controversy of whatever sexual impropriety, I think that is people searching way too hard for something to be outraged about.
That's what I thought.
When that happens, he's Steve Trevor. Steve Trevor gives consent. It's Steve Trevor's body at that point. It's Steve Trevor. The fact that he's in someone else's body is magic. And guess what? There's a million other magical movies where stuff like this happens. Nobody gives a shit until it's a DC movie. So Steve Trevor gives consent. He sleeps with Wonder Woman. Simple.
I see what you're saying.
Elizabeth Perkins
and I'm not saying
with a kid
you're wrong,
in bed.
and I tend to agree. However, if this were oh god damn it, I do not want to go down this, but if this was reversed and it was a man with a woman inhabiting another woman's body, I think it would be a bigger deal.
How could it be a bigger deal than what it's become in the past week?
I really think it would be a bigger deal in the political climate that we're in these days. I think this would be a bigger deal than a couple of geeks talking about it on the internet. I truly do. As a matter of fact, I think the filmmakers would have, even in today's political climate, what we know now and how we think now, I think the filmmakers doing that in that gender role reversal would have rethought what they were doing just because of that. Right or wrong, decision made. I mean, truthfully, if I really put my mind to it, my mind draws the logical conclusion. The reason that it was done the way that it was is Diana even told him at one point, all I see is you. I don't see him or anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Which ultimately goes down the road of that's not the truth. And as we already discussed, this movie is very much about the truth. And that was very much a lie in her mind, and she knows that it was, versus the truth of Steve is already truly gone. And though this may be his spirit inhabiting somebody else's body that I can love and touch and discuss and do all these things with, it's still not really him. That's the lie, and I need to live in the truth. And that's probably the logic that was used in the decision that was made, even though I still think you could have pulled that off without having done it in this particular way.
That's a good point. But yeah, you're right. I still don't think it's necessary. And as for as you said, Andy, I think it's a big reach. I do, and I truly do think people are putting too much into that, trying to make that a big deal. And yes, the anti-DC bias may amplify that all the more. But if you come down to the logic of it, I don't think that logic is incorrect. That's really where I'm sitting with it.
It is literally magic.
Okay.
And then the end scene, I think, is played perfectly. I was very worried that they were going to hook up, or not hook up, but whatever. They were gonna, essentially get together. Romance. They were gonna get together, and I was like, no, don't do that. That's too much. I like that they connected. She paid him a compliment. They had a moment. But if they had literally ended up together, I think it would have almost undercut her letting go of Steve, because then she would have just gotten together with fake Steve, which would have completely defeated the purpose of her walking away from Steve earlier in the film. So no, her now being open to connecting to other people is great. And her having that moment with him is great. But if they had pushed it any further, I would have been like, no, too much. So I'm glad they showed restraint there.
And to piggyback off of that, he's practically the only random guy that she runs into out on the street that doesn't come on to her. I appreciate that.
Yes, and and that's the other thing is they have a connection where it's not about that. And I liked that. And I also love that moment where they're sitting there and they're just taking in the scene, and they're taking in the people, and they're taking in Christmas. And after everything that's happened, after having to face the harsh truth of what is going on and the people you've lost and your own insecurities, etc., everything that she says in that final speech, them taking in this moment of going, you know what? There's still beauty. There's still magic. Even though all of that other stuff is still true too, what we're looking at is true, and it's beautiful. In hindsight, after all the conversation, at the end of the day, I agree with you guys. They should have just kept it simple. Steve's just back. Who cares? His body just miraculously appeared. Who cares where from?
I mean, I could have stood a scene of seeing his skeleton regain its flesh and him climbing up out of the grave. That would have been pretty tight.
Then it'd be a Halloween movie, but I'd like it.
Dude, he got blown apart.
Valid point. I didn't consider that. Yeah.
I tell you what, though, it is a challenge for the third movie now, because you can't do that again.
No, Steve's got to be gone.
No, he's done.
Yeah,
it's over with. Unless she has a Jonathan Kent flashback sort of a thing.
Right.
Then again,
Peggy was gone how many times?
They can bring her back as many times as they want, because she's Peggy.
But I missed the team aspect of the first movie in this, even though I knew I wasn't going to get it. It was a highlight of that first film. But you can't deny that the best part of both these movies is their chemistry on screen together. And for the third movie, you can't do it again. You just can't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'll be interested to see in the third movie if they do show her trying to pursue Bruce or just, anybody, any romantic interest.
Well, and again, like the beginning
He
of the
doesn't
movie.
need it.
Yeah, I mean,
No,
it
I'm not saying she needs it. I'm just saying Steve kept telling her that there's a big world out there. There's so many guys out there better than me. And she's like, I'll never love again. He's like, no, you can't say that. It's like, my wife and I have had this discussion numerous times. She says, if I die, she's done. She's over with. She doesn't want to date. She doesn't want to be anything. She'll just be a widow for the rest of her life. And I tell her, because I can't be alone. I'm a needy person. I need contact and relationship in my life. It's how I am. Though I'm antisocial as hell, I'm in my romantic interest. It's a different thing. She tells me, if I die, please get remarried. Get remarried in a month. Just whatever you need to do to be happy in life. And we've had this discussion. Some people just feel like they can't, and some people can't be without, if that makes any sense. And she's already established she'll never love again, and there's been no inkling of romantic interest in any chapter that we've seen up to it. But the door's been opened now, seeing that she wouldn't have to feel guilty about betraying Steve's memory, loving some other person. Mm. So I'm curious to see if they decide that they want to pursue that angle now, or if they do just want to let her be alone in that fashion, because I'm frankly okay with it either way. Again, this is a curiosity thing with me more than anything.
No, I think it would make sense story-wise, because this really is about her accepting the truth of where her life is and what's happened, because at the beginning, like we said, she's sort of checked out. She's alone. There's the great moment where she's at the cafe and she's by herself. She won't even go to lunch with a colleague. Like she doesn't have personal relationships.
Doesn't have a TV.
Yeah, no TV. She doesn't get to enjoy all the great 80s things. She doesn't even know who Alf is, and that's horrible. Like, she's going to miss out on Alf.
Never watched The Golden Girls.
I know. It's ridiculous.
Mind you, that hadn't come out in 84, but still.
But she still was going to miss it.
The cynicism shown on that side of her character is current up to BVS Justice League time.
Well, but she's
very much the same character throughout portions of this film that she is shown to become in those later two films where she premiered.
Sure, but I mean that's one where I will give you the inconsistency, because it her path in this movie, where she starts is really being checked out, and at the end, because she has to say goodbye to Steve because she accepts the truth, and then that is the whole point of that last scene, is now she is open to connecting to others again. So yeah, for the third movie, for her to find love again, I think it would make sense, because that's what this sets up.
We're just going to have to wager down on, if it happens, who it's going to be with. Bruce, Clark, what's Shiara, if they introduce Hawkgirl, Supergirl?
Dude, it could be anyone. Like, she established in the first movie that men weren't
Aren't
necessary for procreation, but as far as pleasure, they're completely unnecessary.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Maybe Cheetah. Maybe they reconcile.
Oh. Have I mentioned, because I haven't talked about it for a minute, how much I love Kristen Wiig in this part, and how I just loved her performance?
Yes, but that's great. I agree. And that's why I hope we haven't seen the last of her. I want her back.
And upon my initial viewing, I said publicly and to myself, you could have cut 15 or 20 minutes out of this movie because it's a little bloated. And you could have redirected time away from Maxwell Lord and put it to her and kind of equalize their amount of time there. But as I watched this sequentially a second and third time, I realized, and this ain't going to be popular with a lot of people out there, and guess what? I don't give a F. I don't think there's a whole lot you can take out of this film. I don't think it's really all that over-bloated, and I think some of the stuff is truly necessary to the context of the story that's being told.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you.
Could you maybe cut 5 or 10 minutes out of it? Yeah, I think you could probably get away with that. But the initial 20-ish minutes, or some people talking about a half hour to an hour, I'm sorry, I do not concur.
Yeah, I agree. And I think people's biggest complaint is that stretch of film between action scenes, between the mall and the chase on the highway. But all of that is so important story-wise that, like, yeah, I guess you could shave a little bit of the fun stuff of Steve getting used to the 80s, but, like, even that's important to reestablish their relationship. So and what are you going to save? A minute or two? Like, is it really worth it?
Like, there's a chunk of time in that first movie between, the fight on the beach in
Yeah,
Themyscira
until No Man's
and
Land.
No Man's Land.
Yep,
Like,
100%.
That's, what, a third of the movie?
Yeah, totally.
Listen, we all just threw $3 billion at a movie that I found boring as whale shit, with the exception of about 20 minutes near the end. Okay? So, again, we're all going to differ on opinions from time to time, but that doesn't mean they're right or wrong.
That was another thing. Sorry, not the whale shit part, something else. But as we were talking about Steve, another really neat element that I liked to the story of just showing how amazed Steve was by the world.
Yeah.
Then now that it's been 60 plus years, and how we often forget how beautiful the world is because it's every day for us, and it takes someone like that to come and go, this is amazing. Do you guys not realize how amazing this is? Because it's we just are so used to it that we forget. And so I think that was kind of a nice element as well of her being like, yeah, she's just living her life and she's seen it year in, year out. And he comes in and reminds her how cool the world is too. I thought that was really neat.
We take so much for granted in that respect, and I'll just interject a quick story that's kind of off the rails, but Brendan, you'll appreciate this. We were in New Orleans on a swamp tour in about, would have been October of 2003, I believe it was. And there happened to be a guy from Australia that was on this swamp tour with us. Real friendly guy. He was literally traveling all over America, taking in the sights. And there was another couple. We were sitting behind him, and there was another couple sitting in front of him. And they're like, "Oh, where have you been? And, here and here and here." And they're like, "Where are you going next?" He's like, "I'm going to go see the Grand Canyon." The people sitting in front of him says, "We live 2 hours away from the Grand Canyon, and neither of us have ever seen it." This Australian guy, in the politest way that you could possibly imagine, went ballistic on these two. How can you only live 2 hours away from one of the wonders of the world, one of the most beautiful places on the planet, and you've never made the effort to go see this place? So kind of along the same lines of what Andy's saying, so many of us do take for granted the amazingness that's around us and anywhere we look that we simply don't see unless somebody else points it out to us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Jess had a similar thing. Like, Jess had someone who lived in Switzerland as an exchange student when she was in high school, and they took her to a lookout in the city they lived in, and it was just this big open view, and it's a gorgeous view, and she was sort of like, "Oh, we don't have views like this we don't have views in Switzerland." Jess is like, "What are you talking about?" She goes, "Oh, well, the mountains are in the way." It's like, are you kidding? Like, the Swiss Alps,
irony.
They block the view. It's like, you don't know what you've got. The grass isn't always, the greener thing. But with Steve taking in the world, the first time I watched the movie, I watched him, reacting to everything. When I watched it again last night, I watched Diana watching him. Mm-hmm. And it's charming as hell. Like, the look on her face it's like, it's all like she's not acting.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, really kind of beautiful. Yeah. Her watching him react.
I like that he ate 3 Pop-Tarts while she was asleep.
And 2 pots of coffee or something.
Yeah. But yeah, again,
we've all been there, right?
Yeah. Just another nice element to it.
Tell you what, if I'm lying in bed next to Gal Gadot, I'm not doing anything but watch her.
Well, but you need snacks while you do it.
I was going to say, I can't have Pop-Tarts with that.
I can watch. I can watch
my wish life here.
Yeah.
Come on now.
Speaking
of which, the last thing I ate in 2020 was a Portillo's Big Beef sandwich. And the first thing I ate in 2021 was the second Portillo's Big Beef sandwich that I bought so I could have that for breakfast this morning. So yeah, I'm living my best life here.
Awesome. All right, well, we need to start wrapping this thing up. It's not going to be the last time we talk about this movie, so why don't we give some final thoughts and some letter grades. Jamie, take it away.
I think there's way more to like in this movie than there isn't. There are nitpicks, there are gripes, but you know what? You can nitpick and gripe any movie you want if you're looking at it with a critical eye instead of the, I wish to be entertained and I enjoyed what was presented for the most part. And that's where I am. I was entertained by this film for the most part. I enjoyed what was presented for the most part. There are choices that probably I would have made differently, certainly. There aren't very many perfect movies out there in my perspective. So all said and done, I think that this is a really good sequel. I think they made it different enough. I don't think that they rehashed a lot of the same ground. I do like, I didn't get to mention because I just now thought of it, I do like the perspective of at the end of the first movie when she's showing down with Ares, she kind of gives him the option of, let love win and leave these people be. And he's like, never. And she's like, then I'm sorry, brother. And she has to kill him. Mm-hmm. She kind of gives Max Lord that same thing. And Max actually takes the good road, if you will, and renounces his wish. And, Diana doesn't have to kill the big bad at the end. And that's not something that you see a lot at the end of a superhero film. So again, I like the freshness of some of what was presented here.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, but she even does that with Cheetah. Like in the end of Cheetah, she's like, renounce your wish. She always
gives everybody that option. Yeah. So anyway, I really like this movie, but again, I think I'm just shy of loving it. And I wish I did love it. But at the same time, I just don't understand everybody out there that's dogpiling the hate on it. But menus at restaurants, I suppose. Ultimately, I think I give this one a hard B.
All right, great. Brendan?
Yeah, it's funny. Like we've been talking for ages, and I'm sure it'll come up in the inevitable Q&A episode on it. But like, there's so many things that we haven't touched on as well. Like we didn't really do a deep dive into Maxwell Lord, the relationship with his son. There's other aspects there as well, but.
This isn't Disorder. We're not going to break it down beat by beat.
Like similar to Jamie, I did genuinely like it. My problem is, and it seems to be the case with the majority of these DC movies, is I see it before public opinion hits. I form my own opinion, and then I feel completely beat down for a week or two, and probably for a couple of years now, who knows, for feeling the way that I did. I can't say that I'm disappointed in the movie. It's definitely not as good as the first one. It's hard to top what is my all-time favorite comic book movie to date. There are some creative choices that I kind of raise an eyebrow at. But it's the story they decided to tell. For the 2.5 hours that I sit down and watch it, I have a good time. I love seeing Gal be Wonder Woman. I love the chemistry, with Diana and Steve and everything. And you give me that, and I am happy to overlook some flaws. And this movie does have some flaws, but nowhere near the amount that people are trying to throw at it or are throwing at it successfully or not. I guess depends on your opinion of the movie. But yeah, it makes it hard to... I'm not disappointed in the film. I'm just disappointed in the reaction that it's received, because I just think it's totally unnecessary. But I'd probably fall around the B category as well. I don't think I could say B plus, but I also don't think it's worthy of a B minus. So yeah, I'd probably say solid B.
All right. I agree with a lot of what you said, Brendan, because and we even talked about it, I think, a little bit off the air, where it's sort of a double-edged sword. Is like, I love that I got to see this early. I like that I've seen most of the DC films early for one reason or another, and sometimes it blows up in my face, like Justice League. Never forget. But
I still like that movie, and I ain't apologizing for it.
Yeah,
for better or worse.
I still do too. I just,
if the Snyder Cut's better or worse, I'll say it out loud, and I got no problem with it, and I'm certainly interested. But the theatrical cut, it ain't that bad.
I know, I agree. But it's nice to be able to see it fresh, truly fresh, before reactions have really hit, so I can make up my own mind, decide how I feel about it. And But then, yeah, it was somewhat surprising to see the reactions to this one, because I walked out of it going, wow, that was really good. And again, I, much like you guys said, I was short of saying, oh, I loved it, but I was like, man, I really, really liked it. I smiled most of the time. I got sucked in. I was invested. I had a great time watching it. Good superhero action, good Wonder Woman stuff, but some story issues here and there, but I liked it. And then to your point, then just watching people tear into it, which just feels extreme to me, especially because there is so much to like about the movie. But there is just a huge section of fandom out there who they can't wait to hate the next DC movie. I'm sorry, like, it's true, they can't wait to hate it. It's their it's their favorite thing. They love when DC movies come out so they can hate them. Like, they're so into it. And I think you're seeing quite a bit of that here. So I walked out going, man, that was really good. And Catherine agreed. We were like, yeah, it was a really good movie. And then it's been very disheartening and depressing to see a lot of the reactions that have happened since. But it doesn't really change my opinion of the movie. I still feel like I did. I think that I love the cast. I love the characters. I love the action. I love the music. I think it's really well done, really entertaining, really fun, very emotional where it needs to be. It's a good superhero movie. My biggest complaint, and it was my nitpicks, and frankly, the issues that you guys had with Steve Trevor, really falls into the same category of they just bit off a little more than they can chew and made it just, and it just got a little clumsy in the execution. Like, there were ways to streamline some of those story points or some of those creative decisions to make it a little cleaner and a little, to make it work just a little bit better. And I think that's where it falls a little short. It's not as good as the first, but it's a good movie in and of itself. I was perfectly satisfied with it. I liked it again when I watched it again. I'm going to watch it again soon. And guess what? I think I'm going to like it again too. So yeah, I came out really happy with it. I was thoroughly entertained. They announced just days after everyone and their mom watched this on Christmas that Wonder Woman 3 is moving forward with Patty and Gal. That's exciting to me.
Fast track too.
Yeah,
according to the wording of the article.
Yeah, I'm all for it. I think that's great.
I didn't read that article, but did they say whether or not that'll be before or after Rogue Squadron?
They did not, which is a big question.
I would think DC would be like, wrap this up and then go over there, but I don't know. Patty's got her own.
Everyone's talking Rogue Squadron, but what about Cleopatra? Because that's Patty Jenkins and Gal.
Yeah,
that's already been announced too.
Good questions all. But anyway,
don't get me wrong. I want to see all these things, so I'm good any which way it comes. But,
yeah. But I want this team to be able to at least finish their trilogy. So I'm excited for another installment. I'm excited to see where they go next. For me, the first one, I agree with Brendan. It's one of my favorite superhero movies of all time. The second one, I wouldn't put it quite there, but I think it's a really good one that I look forward to revisiting for years to come. So I'm all for a third installment. So for me, I liked it. I think just a tad better than you guys. I'm happy with the B+. I really liked it.
All right.
But we're all pretty close.
We're pretty much in the same neighborhood.
Yeah, we're all pretty close. 2 B's and a B+ for Wonder Woman 1984. We liked it. We acknowledged some of the issues, but we liked it. Sue us. That's fine.
One day there's going to have to be a DC movie that we don't like. Just so it doesn't look like we're completely biased.
I wasn't overly excited about Birds of Prey, and I can barely watch Suicide Squad now, if I'm being honest. So,
I wasn't excited for Birds of Prey, but I walked out genuinely enjoying the movie.
It's not a bad movie, it's just not one that I'm like goo over. So
it actually made me, when at the very start of the episode, Andy, when you said how we finally got to see another DC movie and stuff, I was just kind of like, shit, Birds of Prey, well, I say this year, but being 2020, they both came out in the same calendar year, but so much happened in between those two movies that you can be forgiven for not realizing they were the same year. So there was 2 DC movies in 2020, and they were both female-led ones.
I know. Yeah, it is crazy,
and both heavily criticized.
Yep.
We kind of opened the year with Birds of Prey and finished it here.
Yeah. Andy, I just want to take a quick second and say You look for the positive in pretty much everything, and I adore that about you, and it's one of the reasons why you're one of my favorite people. So hats off to you for that. Thank you. I needed this because so much of the shit that I've read in the last week regarding this film has just made me want to kick puppies. So I appreciate you, brother.
Oh, well, thank you. I thought there was a butt coming.
But Brendan, he's a complete... Anyway.
Oh, well.
Brendan has a tendency to be like that for the most part, too, but I'm a little less inclined to say it to him because I know what he thinks about Jaws.
I can't remember if you said this on air or off air, Jamie. I think it was off air, but like the shit that's happened the last week, I'm kind of with you in that by about Wednesday, I was like, I don't know if I really want to talk about this movie. Like, I just felt so downtrodden and over it before we'd even talked about it. And then, yeah, like I watched it again and I'm like, no, this is a good movie. I'm not, because I did, like the second time I went in with a more critical eye thinking, okay, these are the things that people have pointed out. I'm going to go in looking for them now. I genuinely didn't see them. And I was looking for them.
That's just it. I'm over here shrugging. Like I'm the shrug emoji this week. I'm like, what's your problem here? I don't get it. So,
but that's the other, how Andy was saying before, like how we've got, for the most part, to see these movies before public opinion set in, like before it came out on Saturday here, Boxing Day, since Monday, I think it was, like I've had at least 3 or 4 people on social media say to me, oh, I've heard it's no good. Should I go and see it? I'm just like, yes, like go and see it and make up your own mind. Like I saw it and I genuinely liked it. Like, and that was before the internet told me I was wrong. I'm not wrong. It's my opinion.
No, you're not. That's just it. I mean, this year especially, I've focused a lot on mental health and awareness of mental states and everything like that. And, you know, I encourage everyone to do the same because these obviously are not the easiest times for a lot of people out there. And you need positive support wherever you can get it. But I say this because I was almost to the point a couple times in the last week where I was going to message these 2 guys and tell them, I'm sorry, I don't want to do the podcast. It's just too much for me right now. And I don't want to feel downtrodden with all the negativity that's surrounding this movie. But then I realized I haven't talked to these 2 clowns for over a month, at least not, you know, directly. You know, we message on Facebook and stuff. But what I ultimately came back around to was I don't have to be validated by other people's opinions. I'm allowed to have my own. And if they don't agree with it, that's okay. We don't have to be mortal enemies about this. I don't have to spend all my time fighting or anywhere else. And if I'm being honest, this is why I got rid of my Twitter account a while back. I got tired of that shit. It's not good for you people. You don't need to fight about everything.
Yep.
Your life can be so much more productive if you can just accept you for who you are and be who you are and be happy with who you are and realize that you do not have to be validated by anyone else. You don't need vindication. You don't need any of that shit. If you're okay with you, that's enough.
And that's the truth, and it's beautiful. Eh? Okay. Well,
Yep.
Well, that's nice. That brings it all back around.
All right. Well, I'm glad you both stuck in here. I mean, and I totally get it as well. It's just, yeah, like it's, you know, it's never fun to feel like you're like in the firing squad of people hating on something that you like. But hey, I figured for the people who do like the movie, hopefully they will enjoy this episode and they can, you know, hear some positivity around it. So hopefully we did our job, but without us burying our heads in the sand and going, it's perfect, shut up. Like, we can certainly see some of the flaws.
No, and if anybody wants to discuss why you think I'm wrong about this, please find me on Twitter and we'll talk about it for as long as you want.
I didn't realize you'd actually removed yourself from Twitter. I thought you just like weren't going on there. But when I went to tag you in like the post I put up about doing this tonight, I was like, oh shit, he's actually not there.
He's gone.
No, gone. Deleted. Period. I vamoose. I'm the Steve Trevor of Twitter. I'm out of here.
I don't have to say goodbye because you're already gone.
Yes, sir.
Stop. I can't handle it. All right. Well, let's wrap it up. it won't be the last time we talk about the movie, but Wonder Woman 1984, those are our thoughts. Your thoughts might be different, and that's okay. Jamie, it was good to have you back. I'm glad you made the time. We missed you, buddy.
It was really good getting back to do this. I know I was kind of clumsy and rambly in parts, but I was that way anyhow, so it's not like that was anything new.
Part of your charm.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard me on a
pardon the
podcast?
cough. I promise it's not COVID. It's just because I haven't talked out loud this much in so long that it's kind of tickling my throat. So no worries there, people. But yeah, it was really good to be back. I've missed interacting with all of you out there. Andy, Brendan, love you guys. You're my brothers, and hopefully I can find it in my spirit to kind of get back into some regularity here in 2021. So we'll see what happens.
As much or as little as you want.
Appreciate you.
Doors always open. Brendan, fortunately, when Jamie's not in the mood, your slutty ass is always ready.
Yeah, I got nothing. It's true. Unlike Jamie, and look, I will say it is great to have you back, dude, and really appreciate being able to literally spend the first night, like it's now the 2nd of January for me, the first night with you guys talking about a new DC movie. I couldn't think of a better way to spend, the first night of a new year, at least, standing up. So,
that's why I'm recording laying down.
But look, yeah. So obviously, I do have a Twitter. So if you want to follow me, I'm at Lowy007. My podcast, The Nightlight, is at NightlightPod on Twitter, Facebook.com/The Nightlight, and thenightlight.podbean.com. Yeah, check us out. There's not much happening at the moment. Everything's sort of happening over on Holy BatCast. So yeah.
Now that Christmas is over, what are we going to talk about?
Yeah. Right. Well, funnily enough, I think there's going to be quite the Wayne Manor mailbox episode about this movie coming up at some point.
I'm sure. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, guys. Give Brendan a follow. Don't follow Jamie because he don't want none of it. Thank you guys, as always, for joining us. We do appreciate it. Yeah, thanks for downloading the show. Please do subscribe so you never miss an episode. Please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. And as Michael Keaton's Batman says, I want you to tell all your friends about me. Visit holybatcast.com or find Holy BatCast on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or YouTube. Just search for Holy BatCast. If you've got questions, comments, concerns, you can send those to the Wayne Manor mailbox. As Brendan says, I'm sure we're going to be busy with that very soon. You can send those to holybatcast@rf4rm.com. So that'll do it. On behalf of Jamie and Brendan, I've been Andy. We'll see you next time. Same bat time, same bat channel.
Holy BatCast is brought to you by real fans for real movies. Remember, the thoughts and opinions shared by the participants are theirs and theirs alone, and do not represent the companies or organizations they happen to work for.
Mind you, it'd be pretty ballsy to crack onto it with her husband standing 5 meters away.
What?
You know that on the carousel in that scene, the guy with the little girl is Gal's husband and her daughter.
Oh, that's right.
Oh,
that's right.
okay.
Yeah.
Good joke, Brendan. Good one. Hilarious.
They're always the funniest when you have to explain them.
Yep.
Yeah, I know.
Let's talk about that joke more later, Brendan, okay?
Shut up.
Let's do another episode where it's all about the joke.
Sometimes they land, sometimes they don't.
So, anyway,